Chapter 281. The mecha warriors of the United States and the experts from all over the West were on the first spaceship, while the Zodiac Army, the Vatican, the Greek Guardians, and members of the Covenant of Darkness were on the second spaceship. Before setting off, all the nuclear warheads were already in place. According to the data provided by the U.S. military, it would take approximately 36 hours to reach the predetermined location. At this time, the intercontinental missiles on the ground of various countries were ready to be launched at any time. In order to prevent a conflict between the Vatican and the Covenant of Darkness, Chiyu led the Zodiac Army and the Greek Guardians in the middle. However, this inevitably caused Chiyu and Yamu's seats to be very close. As the leaders of their respective sides, they both sat at the front. On Chiyu's left was Lungair, on his right was Yamu, and on Yamu's right was Pope Marty. The spacecraft was sent into space using a rocket booster. Even these powerhouses found it hard to bear the powerful thrust of the rocket. Fortunately, the gravitational adjustment system inside the American spacecraft was pretty good, so this situation didn't last too long. Chiyu closed his eyes and quietly adjusted the thundercloud force in his body. Training all the time was the best way to improve his strength. These days, his ability to control his emotions had improved the effect of his training to another level. Chiyu, can we talk? Yama's voice suddenly rang in Chiyu's mind. It was a telepathic message. Even the powerful Lungair and the Pope could not hear it. Chiyu's eyes were still closed. He quietly replied in his heart, "What is there to talk about?" Yamu was silent for a while before she said, "Chiyu, can you let go of the hatred between us and let us talk as ordinary friends? The mission we are about to carry out, whether it is you or me, none of them had absolute confidence that they could deal with it. Since that's the case, why can't we discuss our countermeasures openly?" Chiyu replied, "All right, tell me." Although his answer was very simple, it still made Yamu secretly heave a sigh of relief. She calmly said, "Let's not talk about the situation with the United States for now. As the strongest country in the world, they will definitely spare no effort to protect Earth. However, the experts on the spaceship may not be the same. At the very least, when it's time to contribute, I'm afraid only you and us will do our best regardless of the cost." Chiyu, I agree with that. What do you think? Yama was right. Chiyu knew how selfish the Vatican could be. Once danger arose, Malti would never lead his men to the front line. As for the Covenant of Darkness, perhaps they would try their best in the early stages, but when it came time to do so at all costs, only the heavens knew what they would do. Yamu said, "Nuclear weapons are our main trump card this time. However, if we use all our nuclear weapons and still can't achieve our goal, do you have any way to deal with it?" Chiyu's heart skipped a beat. "So, you're saying that you have a feeling?" Yamu shook her head and said, "No, I'm just making a judgment in advance. We have to be prepared for both sides." Chiyu said, "If that really happens, we can only do our best for the sake of Earth. At that time, we can only rely on our own strength." Yamu said, "The appearance of the asteroid made me understand the insignificance of human strength. Compared to the vast universe, we are still too far behind. Chiyu, if there really is a problem in the end, can you trust me again and let us Guardians of the East and West really cooperate fully and exert our strength to the limit? I have a special skill that can divert the impact of the enemy's attack as much as possible. If this skill could be supported by powerful energy, it may be able to have a certain impact on the direction of the asteroid." Opening his eyes, Chiyu turned to look at Yamu. "You want me to support you with energy again?" "Yamu, why do you want me to trust you again?" They have been communicating with each other through spiritual force, and the others around them can't hear what they say. At this time, everyone in the spacecraft was very nervous. They were quietly restraining their energy so that their state can reach the best level to face the mission in dozens of hours. Yama showed a trace of bitterness on her face. Looking at Chiyu's burning eyes, she shook her head gently. "I don't have anything to make you believe me." Chiyu closed his eyes again. "I agree to cooperate." Yamu thought she heard wrong. "You agree?" Chiyu said indifferently. "If it really reaches that level, and even the entire human homeland is about to be destroyed, what is the point of our personal hatred? However, When that time comes, I want to be the dominant one." Yemo froze for a moment. The two began to talk closely, discussing the ultimate method that may be used in the end. It took them a full hour to reach a final agreement. Both of them calmed down and re-entered their respective state of cultivation. With a violent tremor, the spacecraft finally broke free from the shackles of the atmosphere and entered space. Through the thick alloy glass window, you can see the darkness outside. The stars in the distance look a little blurred, but the universe is so beautiful. However, the people on the two spaceships are not in the mood to appreciate it at all. The feeling of depression filled everyone's heart and also filled the governments of every country on Earth. The disputes between the various countries had quietly stopped. If even the Earth can't be saved, what is the point of those disputes? A faint light flashed, and the spacecraft accelerated again after leaving the atmosphere, separated from the booster rocket, and flew towards the unknown distant space at the highest speed that human technology can achieve. 36 hours. It seemed to be a very long time, especially when they were waiting anxiously and oppressively. This time seemed to be much longer. Chi-Yu was awakened from his cultivation by the broadcast in the spacecraft. The control of the spacecraft was completely controlled by the most elite of the United States. At the same time, they were also responsible for communicating with Earth and passing on all the latest news to everyone there. I just received the latest information. The speed of the asteroid has decreased by 8%, but its direction has not changed. Hearing this news, everyone in the spacecraft couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. The slower the asteroid, the more advantageous it was for them. This way, they would have more time to complete everything. However, the good news was immediately followed by bad news. The asteroid's orbit has changed due to the influence of some uncertain factors in the universe. It has changed from straight flight to a rotating flight. All personnel, please be prepared. There are 2 hours left, and we are about to enter the attack position. Wait for the asteroid to arrive. Rotating flight? A glint flashed in Chi-Yu's eyes. Although he hadn't learned any advanced knowledge, he understood what rotating flight meant. The appearance of rotating flight would inevitably greatly reduce the impact of the nuclear bomb on the direction of the asteroid. After all, even if one attacked the same location, the asteroid might deviate to the right during the previous attack. The next attack might cause the asteroid to deviate to the left. If that was the case, the threat that the asteroid could pose would increase greatly, and whether it could be successfully deviated from its orbit would become even more unpredictable. He turned his head and looked at Yemo. Yemu was also looking at him, and the two of them could see the persistent faith in each other's eyes. No matter what the outcome was, they would persist until the last moment. The atmosphere on the spacecraft became even more solemn, while the situation on Earth was even worse. In order to launch intercontinental missiles at the same time, the major powers were communicating directly through satellites without any difference in time. At this time, the President and the Secretary of Defense of the United States were quietly listening to the reports of their subordinates, and their expressions became extremely solemn. The Secretary of Defense said in a deep voice, "The asteroid's rapid rotation will greatly weaken the intercontinental missiles launched from Earth. Now, I'm afraid we can only place our hopes on the brave warriors in space operations." Although the President could barely maintain his calm, the light in his eyes had begun to flicker. After all, it was absolutely impossible not to be worried in the face of such a crisis. In any case, there is no time to change the plan. Pass the news to the brave warriors in space operations and order them to bombard the asteroid in one direction at the beginning of the mission, no matter how the asteroid rotates. This was one of the strategies that had been decided in advance. Although the damage to the asteroid itself would be greatly reduced due to the dispersion of the attack, it was also the best way to deal with it at present. Only by bombarding in one direction could the asteroid gradually change its direction and finally achieve the goal of deviating from its course. At the same time, the Yinhuang Republic also received the news that the intercontinental missiles were ready. The President of the United States was waiting quietly. All the lock-on devices had been set through the U.S. satellite. Now, in front of him was a huge red button, which was connected to all the intercontinental missile launchers of the Yanwang Republic. Every country was waiting for that moment to come, and at this moment, the brave warriors in space operations had also begun to prepare. After putting on their custom-made spacesuits, the experts of the four sides carried out their respective preparations. At this time, they were located in the belly of the spacecraft. When the mission was ready to begin, they would be sent out from here. The spacecraft was very large. Even if there were 10 times more people, it wouldn't feel crowded, let alone just a little more than 1,000 people. At this time, the Guardians of the East revealed their true strength in front of the other three parties. When each member of the Zodiac Legion put on their own spacesuits, there were still a lot of spacesuits that had been prepared in advance around them. This made the other three parties feel a little strange. What was even more strange was that, except for the 12 Zodiac Guardian warriors, the other members of the 12 Zodiac squads did not equip themselves with the nuclear bombs that had been prepared. Chi-Yu stood at the forefront. According to the pre-prepared plan, most of the nuclear bombs that belonged to the Guardians of the East had not been equipped. At this time, there was only 1 hour left before they arrived at their destination. Yama's somewhat anxious voice came. Chi-Yu, is there any problem on your side? If possible, I think I should be able to help you share some of the burden. Chi-Yu shook his head, and his calm voice rang in the ears of every soldier of the Zodiac Legion. Summon. A golden light filled the belly of the entire spacecraft without warning, and a huge pressure broke out from the Guardians of the East in an instant. The sudden appearance of the pressure made the faces of the Dark Parliament, the Vatican, and the Greek Guardians change at the same time. Subconsciously, they all focused their eyes on the Guardians of the East. At this moment, their pupils completely shrank, and some of the less determined ones even exclaimed because of what they saw. The Guardians of the East had completely turned into a golden sea, and a total of 120 golden giant birds appeared quietly beside the 120 members of the Zodiac squad. No wonder the Guardians of the East occupied half of the entire belly of the spacecraft. But what were these giant birds? The members of the Dark Parliament were at a loss and didn't know the answer. Only Lungair had seen the little Peng summoned by Chi-Yu. The shock in the hearts of Yamu and the Pope could not be described in words. In the Battle of Dali, Yamu had personally fought with the golden-winged eagle. That 10,000-year-old vicious beast finally died on the arm of Chi-Yu's ultimate Kirin. That was just one of them. But now, there were more than 100 of them in front of them. No wonder Chi-Yu was always so fearless. With such a strong, comprehensive strength, even if the Greek Guardians joined forces with the Vatican and the Dark Parliament, they may not be able to compete with these Guardians of the East. Mysterious East. How much more shock can you bring? The members of the 12 Zodiac squads all looked very serious. After a long period of training, they now remembered Chi-Yu's instructions in their hearts. No matter what kind of task, they only needed to do one thing, and that was to obey the orders of their respective captains, and even more so, to obey the orders of the Zodiac King. Everyone began to move quickly, putting on those special spacesuits. Space was indeed very dangerous, and all kinds of harmful rays were not something that human beings could withstand. However, the golden giant rocks were different. Compared to humans, their bodies were much stronger. Therefore, there were only two things in the spacesuits. One was the oxygen mask equipped on the head of the golden-winged eagle. Through the oxygen device carried by the eagle, these golden-winged eagles could have the same breathing time and space as the experts of the four sides. The other one was the auxiliary devices on their lower abdomen and wings. These auxiliary devices only had one function, and that was to carry nuclear bomb launchers. Seeing the nuclear bombs appear on the bodies of the golden-winged eagles, the Greek Guardians, the Vatican, and the Dark Parliament all quietly watched. The golden-winged eagles had cultivated for different periods of time. Those with a cultivation of more than 3,000 years were equipped with 6 nuclear bombs. Those with a cultivation of more than 6,000 years were equipped with 10 nuclear bombs, and those with a cultivation of more than 10,000 years were equipped with 16 nuclear bombs. For example, Little Peng, who was the best among the golden-winged eagles, was equipped with as many as 24 nuclear bombs. There seemed to be a lot of nuclear bombs in reserve just now, But after the golden-winged eagles were equipped with more than half of the nuclear bombs, Chi-Yu quietly watched everything in front of him. The nuclear bombs on Little Ping's body were installed by Ru Yue and Ming Ming, so he did not need to worry at all. For this mission, he had to always be in the position of a leader. Only then could he better mobilize the strength of his subordinates. The Pope and Yamu looked at each other, and they both saw the shock in each other's eyes. The Pope's heart was filled with fear, and Yamu was thinking about the Battle of Mount Everest. If Chi-Yu had brought his subordinates back then, under the siege of 120 golden-winged eagles, it was likely that none of the Greek guardians would have been able to survive. The overly shocking scene reduced the pressure in everyone's hearts by a lot. Looking at the giant golden-winged eagles, everyone became much more confident. Everyone's confidence was boosted, and they quickly carried out the final preparations. The number of nuclear bombs equipped on the golden-winged eagles had been carefully calculated to ensure that the golden-winged eagle's flexibility in flight would not be affected after being equipped. After the run-in in the ancient behemoth era, the members of the Zodiac team could completely cooperate with their messengers and achieve the level of unity between man and bird. Only when the golden-winged eagles were summoned would the 12th Zodiac team have a complete combat power. The captain of the American spaceship in charge of the spaceship was stunned for a full 10 minutes before he remembered his mission. After a brief discussion, he asked everyone to wait in place. The spaceship's belly compartment was ready to be released. Warriors, each of you is a warrior who represents life on Earth. I won't say much, as you are already familiar with the purpose of this mission. I can tell you now, this is a guarantee. As long as your mission is successfully completed and the spaceship I am in charge of has not crashed, I will not let any of you lose sight of me. You are the warriors of all mankind. Now, get ready to set off. 20 minutes later, the belly compartment opened. Good luck. The captain bowed respectfully to the experts around him. He bent his waist more than 90 degrees, fully showing his respect for these experts. He understood that the number of people who could survive was much smaller than he had imagined. When using nuclear bombs, the first thing they had to face was the terrifying gravitational force generated by the asteroid. The captain left, and the gap between the belly compartment and the spaceship was completely closed. Chi-Yu did not sit down to maintain his physical strength at its best like the others. Wearing a spacesuit, his body was obviously bigger, which looked a little funny. After opening the device on the chest of the spacesuit, Chi-Yu walked to the nuclear bombs that the Eastern Guardians were responsible for. At this time, about one-third of the nuclear bombs were left. Most of these nuclear bombs were provided by the Yanhuang Republic. 5-colored light gushed out from Chi-Yu's chest and quickly condensed into a huge light barrier that enveloped the remaining nuclear warheads. A faint light flickered, and when everyone's gazes were focused on him, Chi-Yu's body trembled. The colorful light disappeared, and the nuclear bombs also disappeared. Only then did Chi-Yu return to his original position. Facing the members of the Zodiac army, his gaze swept across each of them. Standing at the front were the 12 Zodiac Guardians. They were also wearing spacesuits. In fact, with their strength, they could survive in space for a period of time. Chi-Yu's determined gaze received their response. There was no hesitation in their eyes, even the fatso, Guanjing. Behind the 12 Zodiac Guardian warriors were the plant Soul, Shangbing, Xuannu, and Christy. None of them had accepted Chi-Yu's offer to stay on Earth. Since they were already here, they had already made all the necessary preparations. Next were the members of the 12 Zodiac teams. Every member was accompanied by their envoy, the Golden Eagle. This was the most powerful flying unit in human history, quietly waiting for the Zodiac King's orders. Their gazes were very determined. Looking at Chi-Yu, their eyes flashed with a scorching light. My brothers and friends, we are about to enter space. I only have one request for all of you. No matter what the situation is, you must listen to the team leader's orders. I swear on my life that as long as I am alive, I will do my best to protect your lives. If any of you end up staying in space forever, then I'll definitely accompany him. Do you trust me? Chi-Yu's voice did not contain much emotion, but his meaning was clear to everyone present. The meaning behind his words was very simple. If there was anyone who died among the 130 people, he would definitely be the first to die. Until death. That was the only reply to Chi-Yu. The eyes of every Zodiac Guardian became even more scorching. Of course, they believed in their leader, because everything they had now was given to them by the man in front of them. Although Chi-Yu was younger than most of them, in their eyes, Chi-Yu was omnipotent and almighty. God's orders. They could not be disobeyed. Whether it was for themselves or for their families on Earth, every Zodiac Guardian had made up their minds to fight to the death. They were in a neat formation. The high morale made the fear and nervousness in everyone's hearts disappear. Okay, get on the back. Chi-Yu ordered in a deep voice. The 120 members of the Zodiac Guardian team jumped on the back of their messengers. Chi-Yu gave Little Peng to the 4 women who did not belong to the Zodiac army. With Little Peng's huge body, it would not be a problem to carry them. Chi-Yu and the 12 Zodiac Guardian God warriors did not have mounts, but standing at the front of the group, they were indeed the most eye-catching. Not only did they occupy half of the space in the belly of the spaceship, but they were also the most powerful. In terms of strength, they could also compete with the other 3 forces combined. The Pope, Yamu, and Lungair led their subordinates and waited quietly for that moment to come. The communication device in the spacesuit was fully connected. It allowed them to contact the spacecraft at any time and get various instructions, as well as the situation of the asteroid. Countdown begins. 10 minutes until we enter the designated location. The entire belly of the spacecraft darkened, and red lights lit up around it. Layers of thick alloy doors connected to the spacecraft closed. The air pressure in the belly of the spacecraft began to drop. 9 minutes. The air pressure had dropped to a level that ordinary people could not bear. The spacesuit function of every expert began to activate, providing everyone with oxygen and blocking all the negative effects from the outside world. The golden-winged eagle was very quiet. As long as they could breathe enough oxygen, this level of pressure wouldn't affect them at all since they often roamed the 9 heavens. A faint light flickered, and Chi-Yu's eyes shone. The 4 types of thundercloud force in his body began to effectively adjust. As they mixed, the thundercloud force floated out, and a layer of faint green light enveloped every Zodiac Guardian team member. This greatly reduced the pressure that everyone needed to resist. The Pope raised his scepter, and the scepter of the Goddess of Victory also lit up in Yamu's hand. Lungair's Devil's Kiss released a layer of pink light. In the belly of the spacecraft, 4 kinds of lights were formed, and each of his subordinates was enveloped. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The belly compartment is open. Good luck. With a loud rumble, the lower side of the belly compartment slowly opened. Suddenly, an incomparably powerful airflow swept out. In this powerful airflow, everyone's body suddenly trembled, and in an instant, they had already left the spacecraft and entered the vast and boundless space. Under the control of Chi-Yu, Yamu, the Pope, and Lungair, the 4 experts did not suffer too much of a shock. As soon as they entered space, they immediately felt their bodies lighten, as if all the pressure had disappeared at this moment. A faint light flickered, and the magnificent scenery around them immediately filled everyone's heart with shock. In the distance, they seemed to be able to see a light blue planet. Under the contrast of that planet, the specks of starlight in the universe were so dazzling. Although there was some darkness around them, it was not enough to cover up the dazzling beauty of the universe. Every time that faint light flickered, it would give people an incomparably stimulating feeling. This was a scene that could never be experienced in space simulation training. That light blue planet was not Earth, but Mercury, which was the closest planet to the Sun. After flying at sublight speed for dozens of hours, they had now entered the range where they could see Mercury. However, although they could see it, they were still extremely far away from it. Their current location was the path that the asteroid had to pass to get to Earth. The communicator in Chi-Yu's spacesuit sounded. "Is everything normal? Please reply. Please reply." According to the different battle orders, the experts on the spacecraft that Chi-Yu was on were respectively led by Chi-Yu, Yamu, the Pope, and Lungair, according to their camps. Therefore, they had become the temporary military commanders and the main communication in the spacecraft was also between them. "Everything is normal," replied Chiyu, after which he removed the energy protection on the members of the Zodiac army. He realized that in space, using any skill would consume a very large amount of energy. Just the support of the thundercloud force for a short period of time had caused his energy to be unable to reach a balanced state. Although there were many kinds of energy molecules in space, most of them could not be withstood by the human body. They were not purely natural energy molecules, and if one wanted to absorb them, they would have to go through layers of filtration. Among the 4 experts, his situation was probably the best. After all, it was impossible for the others to have the energy of the source of nature like he did. He activated the booster device on his body, and 2 balls of flames lit up behind him. Everyone moved closer to each other in the air, forming a united front. The spacesuits they were wearing could support a 12-hour supply of oxygen in space. According to the time, although the asteroid had slowed down, it would still pass by their position in 6 hours. Their mission was to launch the nuclear bomb before the asteroid passed by, accurately hit the target, and survive the asteroid's strong gravitational force as much as possible to rendezvous with the spacecraft. For them, there were 2 biggest problems. One was whether the nuclear bomb would be effective, and the other was whether they could survive the powerful gravitational force of the asteroid. In the distance, a large number of white dots of light flew towards them. Even without the notification of his communicator, Chiyu could clearly see that it was the American mecha unit with his extraordinary eyesight. The mecha's engines were fully activated, and their speed was much faster than that of people who were only wearing spacesuits. From this point, it could be seen that in this mission, the mecha warriors would have a much higher chance of survival due to their advantage in terms of equipment. A faint light flickered, and a strong desire to fight appeared in Chiyu's eyes. The mission had finally begun, and he had already cast aside all distracting thoughts. The mecha warriors arrived at their destination first, and after quickly rendezvoused with the 4 experts on Chiyu's side, they formed an attack belt in the same direction according to the original plan. As long as the asteroid arrived there, they would immediately launch a nuclear attack in the same direction. According to the precise calculations of the American team, their current position was about 300 kilometers away from where the asteroid would pass by. At such a distance, they would definitely be greatly affected by the asteroid's gravitational force. Chapter 282. Launch the Intercontinental Missiles. The President of the United States was the first to press the launch button. According to the agreement of various countries, the main intercontinental missiles were composed of the United States, the Yanhuang Republic, and Russia. The United States was the first to launch, followed by the Yanhuang Republic half an hour later, and finally, Russia. Once the intercontinental missiles were launched, the biggest problem they would face was that they would no longer be able to monitor the asteroid. After all, the explosive power of the nuclear bomb was enough to completely destroy the reconnaissance equipment attached to the asteroid. However, at this point, they could only put all their eggs in one basket. The intercontinental missiles passed almost 100 kilometers in front of the 3,000 space warriors. Looking at the white smoke caused by the huge missiles, everyone's heart unconsciously tightened. From this moment onwards, the operation had begun in its truest sense. Everyone was on high alert, waiting for the arrival of the asteroid. A total of 3 waves of intercontinental missiles flew over at intervals of half an hour. No one knew what kind of effect they would have. These intercontinental missiles consumed almost all of the long-range space strike weapons on Earth. One had to know that it was extremely difficult to launch an intercontinental missile over such a long distance. Not only did they have to pass through the atmosphere, but they also had to accurately hit the target. This required a huge amount of military support. This launch cost almost a year's military expenditure of 3 superpowers. The space was still so quiet. There wasn't even a small explosion. A faint light flickered, and everyone who was waiting became more and more nervous. It's coming. It's coming. It's going to be the turn of the 3,000 space warriors to attack soon. No one knew the current situation of the asteroid. Under the bombardment of all the intercontinental missiles, the space warriors now hoped that the asteroid had deviated from its original orbit. If that was the case, there was no need for the backup forces to attack. However, this situation was obviously quite remote. At this moment, they could only wait quietly in space. Due to the bombardment of the intercontinental missiles, the speed of the asteroid's advancement would inevitably be affected. Now, no one knew when it would arrive. At this time, the only thing that could play a certain role was the super radar on the spacecraft. However, the range that this super radar could cover was also limited. In the vast space, it could only wait for the asteroid to enter its detection range. Everyone, get ready. The voice that came from a spaceship finally sounded. Every powerhouse floating in space suddenly woke up from their nervousness, and the nuclear bombs on their bodies began to prepare for launch. They lined up neatly and quietly waited for the arrival of the asteroid. In a short period of time, the spacecraft sent a series of intelligence reports, but none of these reports were good news. The accuracy of intercontinental missiles is very high. According to the detailed judgment of the spacecraft's radar, it can be determined that the previous intercontinental missiles have bombarded the asteroid. However, the effect of the powerful nuclear weapons in these intercontinental missiles was only to reduce the speed of the asteroid by about 1%, and the direction of deviation was difficult to calculate. Simply put, if the asteroid continued to fly, its destination would still be Earth. What was even more depressing to the space warriors was that after the surface of the asteroid was blown up, the internal structure of the asteroid became clear. Based on a simple estimation of the density, the interior of the asteroid was almost entirely made up of metal. His weight was far greater than what the United States had expected. This meant that even if all the nuclear bombs on Earth were to bombard this asteroid, it would not be able to survive. It was also absolutely impossible to destroy it. There was only one way to save Earth now. That was to make the asteroid deviate from its original orbit and not come into contact with Earth. This heavy responsibility fell on the shoulders of the 3,000 space warriors in front of them. Everyone became extremely nervous. Now, although they were waiting, the underwear of many people had already been soaked in sweat. Even some of the Zodiac warriors were no exception. After all, they were all humans and no one wanted to die. Everyone wanted to live. Chi once again heard Yamu's voice in his mind. Be careful, don't forget our agreement. Chi nodded and said, get ready, the asteroid should be arriving soon. Its gravitational force is much greater than we thought. My mental power has begun to be affected by special energy fluctuations, and now I can no longer detect any energy fluctuations beyond the range of my vision. Yamu felt the same way. It seems that we can only pray for ourselves this time. I hope that Earth will not be destroyed. It's here. It's finally here. When a faint red light gradually appeared in everyone's field of vision in the distance, everyone knew that the asteroid had already appeared. The mecha warriors immediately turned the engines on their backs to the maximum. This was the only way they could better resist the power of the gravitational force. The Vatican, the Greek Guardians, and the Covenant of Darkness also raised their respective abilities to the limit. According to the camps they belonged to, they did not hold back and combined their energy together to form a huge protective layer. At this moment, among the camps, no one dared to be selfish, because they all knew that perhaps just a little bit of energy could cause them to become victims of the asteroid's gravitational force. The communication with the spacecraft was suddenly cut off at this time. Obviously, it was affected by the radiation released by the asteroid. Chiyu's eyes lit up, and with a low shout, a circle of golden light suddenly bloomed from each of the golden-winged eagles. They were originally of the same species, and when they felt the impending crisis, they subconsciously combined their energy together. There was no need for the members of the Zodiac team to control them at all. They quickly combined their energy together, forming a huge golden ball of light. The huge energy on one hand resisted the increasingly strong radiation, and on the other hand, it played a certain role in isolating the gravity that had already begun to appear. Chiyu adjusted the communication channel of the communicator so that every space warrior around him could hear his voice. Don't release the nuclear weapons too early. We must wait until the asteroid is within our attack range before we can release it. Otherwise, all our previous efforts will be in vain. Chiyu's voice was heard, causing the slightly panicked space warriors to gradually calm down. At this time, they had no way out. Before the problem was solved, the spacecraft would never come close to pick them up. In the face of such a huge crisis, at this moment, no one had a choice. The nuclear bombs were raised one by one. Although each of them used different methods, they all had the same goal. Their energy was quickly gathering, and they waited quietly. In fact, there was no need to consider whether the nuclear bomb would hit the target or not. This was because the gravity of the asteroid itself was very strong, and any object would be attracted to it. Therefore, as long as the nuclear bomb was launched, it would definitely hit the target. However, now the problem faced by the space warriors was to make the nuclear bomb explode in the same direction and use the powerful explosive force to push the asteroid out of its original orbit. This made the difficulty of the mission greatly increased. Lieutenant General Reed quickly flew to Chiyu's side. He still had a lot of respect for the Zodiac King. The competition that day left an extremely deep impression in his heart. At this moment, the original plan was somewhat different. After listening to Chiyu's words to calm the morale of the troops, he immediately flew over and asked Chiyu, "What should we do now?" "Chiyu, Lieutenant General, you must be more familiar with space warfare than I am. From now on, all of us will listen to your orders. However, I can give you a suggestion. In order to achieve the goal of hitting the same direction at the same time, I suggest that everyone make certain adjustments when launching the nuclear bomb. Launch it freely according to the speed at which it is launched. In the situation where we have to divert our attention to resist gravity, we will have to pray to the heavens." Hearing Chiyu's words, Reed quickly steadied his mind. Orders came from his mouth, and the 3,000 space warriors gradually widened the distance between each other according to his orders. Only by doing so would they have a higher chance of increasing the number of lives in the same direction. Gravity. The terrifying gravity was the most important factor that affected the accuracy of the attack. Once affected by gravity, it was impossible for the nuclear bomb to hit the targeted location. Just as Chiyu had said, when the real problem arose, it was more up to the heavens to decide one's fate. The faint red light became more and more obvious in the silent space. The faint red light did not look strong. It was not a fiery energy, but a strange metallic light. It was not known if it was caused by the previous intercontinental missile bombardment. At this time, when they got closer, they could see that there seemed to be electric currents on the surface of the asteroid, and the faint red light seemed to be produced by these electric currents. The first to confirm the appearance of the electric currents was Chiyu. He had the thundercloud force. How could he not feel the sudden increase in the lightning energy particles in the air? At this moment, the asteroid was only a few thousand kilometers away from their position. Its size was constantly increasing in everyone's eyes. The space warriors tried their best to distance themselves from each other. Lieutenant General Reed didn't show any favoritism. At this time, the closest to the asteroid were the mecha warriors under him. Such an order was also respected by the other powerhouses. Finally, the asteroid was getting closer and closer. The powerful gravitational force was increasing by 10 times. The mecha warriors were the first to bear the brunt. The engines behind each mecha were spitting out red lights. Obviously, they had been pushed to the maximum. Only then could they barely control themselves from being sucked away by the gravitational force. At this time, the difference in strength was immediately determined. The ordinary powerhouses from the West who were with the mecha warriors were the Westerners who volunteered to participate in this mission. The difference in strength was immediately determined. Some of them were indeed strong enough to barely maintain the balance of their bodies, but the weaker ones had already begun to fly towards the asteroid. At this time, no one could save them. Even if they had the ability, they couldn't do it. The bigger crisis was still behind them. Mecha warriors, fire! Reed roared. Immediately, the first wave of 1,600 nuclear bombs was fired from the nuclear bomb launchers on the shoulders of the mecha warriors. Under the influence of the asteroid's gravitational force, They bombarded towards the asteroid at an incomparably fast speed with countless dazzling tails of flames. The situation that everyone was worried about finally happened. Because the asteroid itself was rotating rapidly, and its shape wasn't a regular circle, when the huge gravitational force acted on the nuclear bombs, most of the nuclear bombs were immediately pulled away from their original attack trajectories. Countless mushroom clouds appeared on the surface of the huge asteroid. The shock wave produced by the huge roar actually weakened the asteroid's own gravitational force for a moment. At the same time, the asteroid's forward speed was also slowed down a little. It seemed to pause in midair for a moment before continuing to fly forward. Everyone's hearts were in their throats. However, they soon discovered that the mushroom clouds appeared irregularly in the corners of the asteroid. Through the telescopic device, they could see that although there were many huge scars on the asteroid, they didn't really affect it at all. The asteroid was getting closer, and the huge gravitational force was fluctuating between strong and weak. The mecha warriors who joined the mecha army later were originally built in a hurry, so the quality of their mechas was not as good as the original mechas, and problems immediately arose. More than 60 mechas had their engines explode. Without any suspense, their huge bodies followed the Western powerhouses from before, flying towards the asteroid like human nuclear bombs. What should they do? With such a huge gravitational force, aiming was no longer of any use. The speed of the asteroid was definitely not something that the spacesuits of the mecha warriors and Chi-Yu's people could compare with. The asteroid was about to pass in front of them. If they wanted to catch up, it would become extremely difficult. Making a prompt decision, Chi-Yu was the first to react. Fire! Everyone fire the nuclear missiles. With a roar, a five-colored light condensed in front of him. Amidst the huge energy fluctuations, a large number of nuclear bombs sprayed out. Through the wave of attacks of the mecha warriors just now, Chi-Yu had already seen that this asteroid was very strange. According to its own internal structure, the gravitational force at different positions on the asteroid was also different. In this case, it was impossible to find an effective way to aim in a short period of time. Now, all they could do was to maximize the explosive power of the nuclear bombs as much as possible. As for the result, no one knew, but at least with this kind of bombardment, there was still a chance. Fire continuously. Every space warrior subconsciously accepted Chi-Yu's orders while their minds were blank. Tyrannical energy fluctuations. A huge group of nuclear bombs suddenly sprayed out and flew in the direction of the asteroid without hesitation. That was tens of thousands of nuclear bombs. Nuclear bombs that could destroy all living things on Earth. The crystallization of human wisdom. The strongest offensive weapon of mankind. What kind of effect could it have? At the moment when all the nuclear bombs exploded on the asteroid at almost the same time, an irresistible, huge wave of air suddenly erupted from the body of the asteroid. Rays of dark blue electric light, unexpectedly thick to an unimaginable extent, instantly released in all directions. And at this moment, the fast-moving asteroid also stopped at this time. Amidst the rising mushroom clouds, its figure could no longer be seen clearly. The dark blue electric light was not simple lightning. It was incomparably surging energy. No one could know where this energy came from. Looking at the dark blue light that scattered in all directions, everyone could only think of one possibility, and that was that the asteroid was about to self-destruct. Self-destruction was, of course, a good thing for Earth. At least it would no longer be a threat to Earth. However, if such a huge asteroid self-destructed at this time, then, not to mention other people, even strong people like Chi-Yu and Yama would absolutely not be able to survive. Dark blue electric light. Almost in an instant, it crossed a long distance and flew in the direction of the remaining more than 2,000 space warriors. Although there was only one dark blue light, it was still flying in the direction of the remaining more than 2,000 space warriors. But it was this one ray of electric light that created an incomparably terrifying scene. Although the dark blue light was not gravity, it was more destructive and terrifying than gravity. At this time, The power of the dark blue light could be described as Lungair's weapon. Kiss of death, that's right. This was the kiss of death. The dark blue electric light swept in from the direction of the mecha warriors. One could clearly see that the width of this electric light was not comparable to the lightning on Earth. In that instant, it actually reached to the extent of more than 300 meters. Even after crossing such a long distance, its power was still so shocking. The mecha army used their last safeguard. All of the defensive shields were activated to the maximum, disregarding the energy consumption, but these energy shields were as fragile as paper in the face of the dark blue electric light. The huge energy light did not give the mecha army any chance at all. Wherever the electric light passed, one by one, the mecha warriors completely stopped moving. Dazzling balls of light accompanied the surging sound of explosions. Wherever the light passed, it was like a clean sweep. In the blink of an eye, more than 1,000 of the 1,600 mecha were turned into dazzling light. That only happened in an instant. In the next instant, a ball of purple light rushed into the dark blue light without any warning. The kiss of death stopped, stiffened, and in the next second, it actually disappeared without a sound. The remaining hundreds of mechas stared at the scene in front of them in a daze. They even felt the call of death just now. They watched as the dark blue electric light was already in front of them, but there was no way they could defend themselves. Just as they were about to lose all hope, thinking that they were about to be destroyed, that purple figure suddenly appeared. All of the dark blue light seemed to have been completely absorbed by him in an instant, disappearing without a trace. The process of the massive energy waves retracting instantly caused these mecha warriors to be sent flying like toys, scattering in all directions. Some of the unlucky ones were sucked away by the gravity of the asteroid and turned into human nuclear missiles, but most of the remaining mecha still managed to survive, doing their best to control their bodies in a daze. The purple figure stopped in midair. The purple light around his body continuously fluctuated violently. Everyone who could still maintain their consciousness had their eyes focused on him. What happened? The spacesuits all looked similar, but the purple figure was clearly wearing a spacesuit. Who was this? Who was it that blocked the destructive dark blue lightning with the strength of a single person? It should be known that from the direction of the explosion of the dark blue electric light, the final result would definitely be to wipe out all the space warriors. When that happens, no one knew how many people would survive. No one knew. Other than a few strong people who had some confidence, most people could only wait for death. It was this purple figure who saved the lives of the remaining people. At this moment, the space warriors who were still alive were anxious to know who he was. They were even more anxious to know if the asteroid had deviated from its orbit. This was a real hero, a hero who sacrificed himself to help others. The purple figure began to change. The purple light suddenly converged, revealing the spacesuit inside. The booster device on the spacesuit had completely lost its effect and floated quietly in the air. Suddenly, more than a dozen figures rushed towards the floating body at lightning speed. Others might not know who the purple figure was, but how could the Zodiac warriors not know who it was? A total of nearly 20 figures, including Yamu, rushed towards the floating body at their fastest speed. Chiyu, yes. The one who rushed out at the critical moment was Chiyu. The moment the dark blue light flashed, Chiyu had already rushed out. The incomparably huge amount of lightning attribute energy gave him no time to hesitate. However, the speed of light was terrifying after all. Even though Chiyu had increased his speed to the limit, it was still not comparable to the speed of light. Even so, when most of the mecha warriors were destroyed, he finally rushed into the light that was full of domineering lightning energy. There is only one way that Chiyu could think of. This was the only way to prevent the others from being bombarded by the lightning energy. As for whether the asteroid would explode or whether the space warriors could survive, it was up to fate. After crossing such a long distance, the energy of the dark blue light had actually been greatly weakened. However, its energy fluctuations were still very terrifying. It was so terrifying that even Chiyu found it difficult to withstand it. After countless transformations by the natural source of energy, Chi-Yu's body was even stronger than Diamond's. However, at this moment, he smelled a burning smell. His body seemed to have turned into barbecued meat, and he was so numb that he could not move. However, the dark blue light finally disappeared, and the light in Chi-Yu's eyes was so gratifying. He had succeeded. He had succeeded in the end, but he did not know if he could continue to live after absorbing the huge amount of energy in the universe. The members of the Zodiac squad rushed out after the 12 Zodiac Guardians. At this time, they had already realized that the figure that rushed out was their Zodiac King. Chi-Yu's voice from the spacecraft was still ringing in their ears. He had said that if anyone in the Zodiac army died, he would definitely be the first to die. This was the sacrifice of the king for his own life. If the dark blue lightning swept over, what would the result be? Even if the golden-winged eagle was strong enough to survive, but what about them? No matter how confident they were, they did not think that their modified bodies could surpass titanium alloy. However, just when the 12 Zodiac Guardians, the 4 women, and Yama were about 10 meters away from Chi-Yu, something suddenly happened. A strong light shot up into the sky, and a huge purple light suddenly burst out. The huge explosive force sent more than a dozen people flying at a speed faster than when they came. Everyone who was sent flying clearly felt that their whole body had become abnormally numb. In the midst of their shock, they quickly gathered their own energy to fight against the huge energy. The purple light continued to erupt like a geyser, and in mid-air, the spacesuit on Chi-Yu's body began to melt and disappear, revealing his original appearance. But now, this Chi-Yu's body had been seen. That's right, it was not only the spacesuit that disappeared from Chi-Yu's body, even the clothes inside were gone. Not a single trace was left. His bronze-colored skin, almost perfect body proportions, and every solid muscle were all presented in front of the space warriors. Lungair's eyes were shining, and Yamu, who was close to him, quickly turned her head away, blushing. In her life, this was the first time she saw a man naked. How could she not be shy? The purple light seemed to be electric, but it was not distorted. When the purple light completely illuminated the surroundings, a qualitative change occurred. The terrifying dark blue from before appeared again, but this time, it was not the lightning that shot out from the asteroid, but the purple light that was released from Chi-Yu's body. At first, only the light in the middle changed, but soon, as if it was contagious, the purple light released from his body turned completely dark blue. The powerful energy fluctuations shocked everyone. They did not need to come into contact with the dark blue light to feel the waves of numbness from the energy fluctuations. Even a super strong person like Yamu was no exception. Chi-Yu's body began to change significantly. First, his sharp muscles began to soften, and the long white hair on his head was no longer as pale as before, but completely silver. A huge black shadow rose from behind him, and a faint light flickered, directly enveloping his body. Ink Kirin, who was standing on a 4-colored auspicious cloud, had an unprecedentedly clear form, as if he had a physical body. At this moment, the powerful energy fluctuations were fully displayed. Green, blue, red, dark blue. For colors of light alternated from Chi-Yu's body. Every time it appeared, the energy fluctuations produced by his body would increase. Qualitative change. Kirin had undergone a qualitative change. The Zodiac Guardian warriors thought of this at the same time. They all knew very well what this meant. Chi-Yu's strength had evolved. After receiving the lightning, not only was he not injured, but he had also evolved. In fact, even Chi-Yu himself felt a little baffled. After withstanding that bolt of lightning, he had already prepared himself for the backlash. Although the dark blue light had weakened a lot after spreading for a long distance, he was still sure that the electricity released by the asteroid would definitely cause him a lot of damage. No matter how strong his body was, he could not compete with the power of the universe. However, Chi-Yu soon realized that he was wrong. He was shocked to find that although his body was numb, it was absorbing the huge amount of electricity like a sponge. In just a moment, The energy that made his body extremely uncomfortable had disappeared. The next moment, he could no longer feel his thundercloud force, and his spiritual energy was completely restrained. Even a usually peaceful source of nature energy seemed to have disappeared. Was he finished just like that? Chi-Yu's mind went blank. Now, he only hoped that the asteroid's flight path had been changed by the nuclear bomb. If that was the case, at least his sacrifice was not in vain. However, he soon felt that something was wrong. A strong electric current flowed through every cell in his body, and then an incomparably surging energy instantly filled every corner of his body. A series of lights and shadows flashed through his mind, and all kinds of skills flashed through his mind, deeply imprinting themselves in his memory. The huge electric current gradually weakened, but the feeling of power in his body did not disappear. Instead, it was greatly enhanced. The next moment, after the electric current, there was a scorching heat. The huge heat made him feel so comfortable that he almost moaned out loud. When the scorching energy seemed to be too hot, the refreshing and gentle water energy wave replaced it, followed by the free wind. The 4 types of energy that he possessed appeared one by one, and every time it appeared, all the energy in his body became a single attribute. The huge energy wave seemed to have caused a strange change in his body. Although he could not tell what kind of change it was, Chi-Yu had also woken up. Chapter 283. The feeling of enlightenment spread throughout his body. Master Zagru was right. Although he had broken through to the 8-cloud realm, his true strength was not that of an 8-cloud. Instead, it was equivalent to the 9-cloud level of an ordinary ink Kirin. Otherwise, how could the abilities that could only be used by the 9-cloud level appear in his memory? Moreover, his energy seemed to be enough to use them. Ecstasy filled his body. The energy in his body gradually stabilized under the control of his mental strength. The ink Kirin pattern returned to his body. However, this time, the Kirin pattern on his body did not need to be activated by energy to appear. Instead, it was permanently maintained on his skin. The domineering pattern attached to his body, coupled with Chi-Yu's tall and vigorous physique, made him look extremely powerful. Perhaps it could not be described as powerful. It was a state of the highest quality in the world. Chi-Yu knew that he had now surpassed the level of Yamu and the Pope. He had reached another peak of human abilities. A faint light flickered. Chi-Yu's eyes lit up. After the light bloomed, his silver eyes converged and became as black as ink. A layer of dazzling black scales appeared on his body. That was the Kirin armor. Without the assistance of any heaven and earth energy, Chi-Yu directly entered the 2nd stage of origin mutation. However, Chi-Yu was a little disappointed. Although his strength had already reached the 9-cloud level, which was equivalent to an ordinary black Qilin, he did not use the 3rd stage, which was also the last stage of origin mutation. A faint light flickered. Chi-Yu's eyes became even brighter. With the Qilin armor on him, he was no longer able to make the women present shy. At this moment, he could not care less about the joy of improving his strength. Instead, he looked at the small planet in the distance. After all, if the problem of the small planet could not be solved, it would be meaningless for him to improve his strength no matter what. Everyone's aura and gaze followed Chi-Yu's direction. At this moment, the gravitational force produced by the small planet had become much weaker than before, because it was still moving forward, and it had already started to move away from where everyone was. Lieutenant General Reed was very lucky that he was not destroyed by the dark blue light just now. At this time, he calmed himself down and quickly flew to Chi-Yu's side. Looking at the Zodiac King in front of him who was covered in the incomparably mighty Kirin armor, he finally understood why this person could become the king of the Eastern Guardians. The electricity that had destroyed more than half of his subordinates had been completely absorbed by this person. Was he still human? If not for the fact that he was an atheist, he would have addressed Chi-Yu as God. "Mr. Chi, thank you," Reed said with difficulty. At this moment, his heart was in extreme pain. It should be known that the United States had spent a total of 10 years. They had spent countless military resources to build this mech legion. At this time, at least 2/3 of the mecha operators would never be able to return to the embrace of Earth. Those comrades were all Reed's best subordinates. How could he not be sad? Chiyu said in a deep voice, "Don't thank me yet." Lieutenant General Reed, has the position of the small planet changed? Reed was stunned for a moment, then turned his gaze to the small planet. The mushroom cloud on the small planet was gradually subsiding. The power of a nuclear bomb was indeed terrifying. A total of tens of thousands of nuclear bombs had actually reduced the volume of the almost completely metal asteroid by about a third. But this was already the limit that Earth's armed forces could achieve. However, even if the asteroid was only 2/3 of its volume, with its huge gravity, once it hit Earth, a disaster would still be inevitable. Chiyu's question was also the question in the hearts of the surviving space soldiers. Reed did not answer immediately, but quickly contacted the spacecraft. As the asteroid gradually moved away, the electromagnetic interference was gradually reduced. Finally, after about 15 minutes of waiting, Reed contacted the spacecraft. Frankly speaking, at this time, these space soldiers had sacrificed a third of their number to complete this mission. All the nuclear bombs had been completely detonated on the asteroid without any reservation or waste. It could be imagined that the entire asteroid was now wreaking havoc with a huge amount of radiation energy. The shock wave also had a great impact on the interior of the asteroid. If it had deviated from its original route, then this mission could be said to have been completed perfectly. However, in many cases, perfection was never so easy to appear. Listening to the spacecraft's analysis of the asteroid's position from Earth's main radar, Reed's face became more and more ugly. Although no one could see what his face was like through the mecha, the rest of the people here were, after all, strong people from all over the world. However, the rest of the people here were all powerhouses. Just from Reed's movements and aura fluctuations, they could tell a thing or two. Chiyu hesitated and said, "Did we fail?" Reed raised his head and looked at Chiyu, who was floating in space, surviving freely without a spacesuit. He smiled bitterly and shook his head, saying, "No, I can't say that we failed. Or rather, we have succeeded halfway." Chiyu hurriedly asked, "What is the situation? Hurry up and tell me." Reed said, "After being bombarded by the nuclear bombs, the asteroid itself has already been severely damaged, and its structure has even changed to a certain extent. However, this asteroid is still close to 2/3 of its original size, although it has slightly deviated from its original flight path, according to the careful calculation of the radar on Earth. Although it will not hit Earth again, but, judging from its current speed and direction, it will brush past Earth's atmosphere in 5 days. At that time, it should pass through the atmosphere above Asia. What will the result be? I just want to know the result." Chiyu's heart sank. He knew that this mission was probably not completed. Reed said, "You have seen its gravitational force. If it brushed past the surface of Earth, under the strong gravitational force of Earth and the asteroid, at least all of Asia will be completely destroyed. At the same time, it will have a great impact on Earth itself. The atmosphere will be seriously damaged. As for the extent of the damage, it is unknown. What we can do now is to try to move humans from various countries in Asia to the Americas, which is the least affected by the asteroid. As for how many lives can be saved, no one can say for sure. The destruction of Asia, serious damage to Earth? In terms of the degree of harm, at least it was much better than a direct impact on Earth. However, this result was definitely not something you could accept. Looking at the asteroid that was gradually becoming smaller, the light in Chiyu's eyes turned silver again. His eyes swept across every space soldier around him. Perhaps most of the people here are not from Asia. However, if the atmosphere is damaged, coupled with the impact of the asteroid on Earth, even if Earth is not destroyed, I am afraid it will be a great disaster for mankind. Now, I need your strength, everyone's strength. Who is willing to change its course with me again? I will not force it. Now, give me an answer in 1 minute." Reed looked at Chiyu in horror. "Don't tell me you want to use your own ability to stop the asteroid? This is absolutely impossible." Chiyu glanced at Reed and shook his right index finger gently in front of him. "I've said it before. In this world, there's nothing that's impossible. As the saying goes, man can conquer nature. As long as we have the confidence, we will not let go of even the slightest chance. I believe that the final winner will be us. Every soldier of the Zodiac army appeared beside Chi without hesitation. They would not retreat. The destruction of Asia would mean the destruction of their home. So what if they could save America? If they lost their own country, how could they continue to survive on Earth? Moreover, no soldier of the Zodiac army would disobey Chi orders. The people of the Covenant of Darkness waited quietly. Most of their eyes fell on Long-Air. There was a hint of hesitation in Long-Air's eyes. She could not make a hasty decision. For hell, the western world of Earth was their main target. If there was a possibility that the Covenant of Darkness, the representatives of hell, would be destroyed, she had to think carefully. At this moment, Yamu stepped forward and looked at Chi with a firm gaze. She only said one sentence. Protecting Earth is our responsibility. Everything will go according to the original plan. Looking at Yamu, Chi eyes softened a little. At this moment, she stood up and supported him, which was something that Chi did not expect. However, he saw true fearlessness in Yamu's eyes. He could not help but sigh in his heart. In fact, compared to Yamu, he was not qualified to be a guardian. After all, no matter what Yumao did, she would always put the word protect at the forefront. Compared to her, he was too easily swayed by his emotions. Chi did not say anything else. Time is limited. Those who are willing to support me, come with me. Those who are not can wait here for the spacecraft. Reed suddenly said loudly, Mr. Chi, as a soldier, it is also my responsibility to protect Earth. I am willing to lead the remaining mecha warriors and stand on the same front as you, even if the final result is already determined. Chi turned around in surprise to look at Reed. He suddenly realized that these mecha warriors seemed to have grown taller. Not a single one of these professional soldiers showed any signs of fear, and not a single one of them retreated or raised any objections. This is what a real soldier is like. With a gentle smile on his face, Chi said, Lieutenant General Reed, thank you for your support. However, you cannot participate in the second phase of the plan that we are about to launch. This requires the energy of humans. You can wait here for the spacecraft. Leave one to wait for those who might survive. Take the other to quickly return to Earth and inform Earth. If possible, let them prepare as many countermeasures as possible. At the same time, start moving the Asians. After all, I can't guarantee that this operation will be successful. Reed was stunned for a moment. Looking at the firm light in Chi-Yu's eyes, he suddenly thought in his heart, could these Asians really do it? If that's the case, then I'm afraid they are really gods. After explaining this to Reed, Chi-Yu immediately moved. He called Little Peng and let the 12 Zodiac Guardian warriors stand on Little Peng's body. They chased in the direction of the asteroid at the fastest speed. After being intercepted by the nuclear bomb, the speed of the asteroid's flight was reduced a lot, at least much slower than the spacecraft. At this time, Chi-Yu's golden-winged eagle flew, and its special ability to soar 90,000 miles was more effective in space. After all, the resistance in space was far less than on Earth. More than 100 golden lights flew out like lightning. Under Chi-Yu's instructions, Yamu and her 12 Zodiac Guardians also boarded 13 of the stronger golden-winged eagles. At this time, it seemed that they were the only ones who really persisted until the end. Wait a moment. Marty's figure flashed, and under the milky white light, he caught up to Chi-Yu in an instant. Although he was not very good at flying, he could still increase his speed in a short distance. Chi-Yu did not stop flying. The 2 pairs of wings on his back were still controlling his body to fly forward. Your Holiness, are you trying to stop us? Marty's eyes were much brighter than before, and a gentle smile appeared on his face. Mr. Chi, when you said those words just now, Marty's eyes shone brighter than before. I suddenly figured it out. As the spokesman of God in this world, if I flinch in the face of the crisis of humanity, then I do not deserve to sit in this position of the Pope. Even if I die, I believe that my congregation will continue to spread the Lord's blessings. Therefore, the 4 cardinals and I have decided to participate in your plan. From now on, I will listen to your orders. Chi watched in shock as Marty and the four cardinals quickly boarded the backs of the four golden-winged eagles. Without Chi orders, the Zodiac warriors, who were the owners of the golden-winged eagles, wanted to refuse, but were stopped by Chi. At this critical moment, the Pope's realization warmed Chi heart. He was not fighting alone after all. The Earth's guardians finally understood. Chi took a deep look at Marty, and the hatred from before quickly dissipated. For the first time, he had a good impression of the highest leader of the Vatican. If it's not too dangerous, I think I'll join as well. But if there's danger, I'll run away immediately. Lumiere caught up after the Pope. She did not need the golden-winged eagles to help her fly, because she was currently standing on the shoulder of the eight-winged fallen angel Lucifer. The Covenant of Darkness had only sent the two of them, but their strength had already surpassed that of all the other members of the Covenant of Darkness combined. The guardians of the four sides had finally completely abandoned their prejudices and came together for the final protection of Earth. All right, let us carry out this final operation together. Chi was filled with pride. He suddenly accelerated, and the four types of thundercloud force in his body circulated at a high speed. After advancing to the level of 8 clouds, his thundercloud force and the source of nature were more closely integrated. The huge energy waves allowed him to better filter the various types of energy in the universe. Then, he converted them into his own thundercloud force. Under such circumstances, the energy in his body could be completely maintained in a state of balance. They quickly approached the asteroid that had just flown past. Under Chi-Yu's lead, the most powerful people on Earth kept increasing their energy to the limit. Although no one except Yamu knew what Chi-Yu was going to do, they now had absolute trust in Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu didn't fly directly towards the asteroid. Instead, he used his slightly faster speed to lead the group in a large circle. He tried his best not to be affected by the asteroid's gravitational pull as they flew towards the asteroid. Intercept. That's right, intercept. While flying, Chi told everyone about his and Yama's plan. Later, when we fly in front of the asteroid, I need each of you to help. Everyone present, except Lumiere and Senior Lucifer, had experienced the effects of the source of nature. The biggest feature of my source of nature is that it is not repelled by any type of energy. No matter what method you use to enhance it, I need all of you to instill all of your energy into me. As for how to do it, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about it. I'll let you know when my energy reaches a sufficient level. Evacuate the surrounding area immediately. Chi-Yu, what are you going to do? Ryua looked at Chi-Yu's calm face and suddenly felt a deep fear in her heart. Chi-Yu smiled and said, "Don't worry, my love. The Zodiac Guardian Warriors need to fight with me until the last moment. Later, when I absorb the energy, I will use our Zodiac Guardian domain and Miss Yamu's the signs of the Zodiac domain as the core to fill the energy. The final attack will be done by me and Miss Yamu. I hope we can complete this mission. We will definitely succeed." Rainai's spacesuit had already been taken off by her at some point. The scepter of the goddess of victory in her hand exuded a holy light. Looking at Chi-Yu, her eyes were calm and even a little happy and excited. It was as if the upcoming crisis was not a huge one. Death was not scary. At least it was much better than constantly suffering in the heart. That was what Yama thought. She was very clear that even if she died, this time, she could die together with Chi-Yu. Perhaps this was the best outcome between her and Chi-Yu. If they really died together, then all the hatred would disappear. She would finally be able to be with Chi-Yu forever and would no longer need to bear any responsibilities. Therefore, Yama's current mood seemed to have returned to the time when she was with Chi-Yu in the Aegean Sea. She was no longer worried about whether this operation could achieve final success. Going all out and giving her last bit of strength was enough for her. The so-called doing one's best and leaving the rest to fate was probably the best portrayal of her current state. Flying, continuously flying. The speed of the asteroid was still very terrifying. Although the golden-winged eagle was the strongest flying beast, there was still a big gap compared to the spacecraft. It took more than an hour before they finally arrived in front of the asteroid. There was still all kinds of smoke on the surface of the asteroid. Obviously, the destruction caused by the nuclear bomb had not calmed down yet. The terrifying nuclear weapons were still so powerful even in space. Unfortunately, in the end, they still failed to destroy this asteroid that threatened Earth. Chiyu did not stop, because he knew that as long as he stopped now, he would soon face the asteroid head-on. If the huge gravitational force came from the front, it would be very difficult to resist. He began to issue orders. Everyone, get ready. Concentrate your energy, follow the guidance of my source of nature, and get ready to output. Miss Yamo, you get ready too. Yama nodded. After a simple distribution, the energy of the Pope and the 4 red-robed archbishops would be injected into Yamu's side, while the energy of Lung-Air, Lucifer, and everyone in the Zodiac army would be injected into Chiyu's side. The final result will be decided by Chiyu and Yamu. No one knew what would happen, and no one had the ability to think about it. An emerald-like light rose from Chiyu's body, enveloping everyone. Even Yamu and her constellation guardians needed to use the energy characteristics of the source of nature to absorb the energy from the Pope and the red-robed archbishops. At the moment when the source of nature energy enveloped them, an unprecedented strange feeling suddenly filled Chiyu's mind. He discovered that his mental strength had increased by hundreds of times within the range of the emerald-like light. Not only could he feel everything around him, but he could even grasp the slightest change in everyone's energy within the range of the source of nature energy. What was even more amazing was that the source of nature energy seemed to have undergone a qualitative change. At that moment, the energy attributes of everyone around him had completely disappeared. They all became the same soft attribute in the envelopment of the source of nature energy. As for his own energy, the 4 attributes were all hidden, and the strength of the energy did not change. But it had completely become an incomparably huge amount of natural energy. The fusion of energy of the same attribute had become much easier than Chiyu had imagined. In the entire camp, with his and Yama's bodies as the core, a huge amount of pure energy rapidly condensed. Chiyu could clearly feel that the energy in his body was inflating like a balloon. The indescribable energy fluctuations filled his body in an instant, and it was constantly strengthening. Even with the strength of his body, in the process of suddenly accepting such a huge amount of energy, it was actually developing in the direction of destruction. Chiyu understood that if this continued, he would explode and die in a few minutes. Chiyu, have you really decided to do this? Xuanyuan's soul's voice became a little different from before. It sounded very calm. It was no longer as overbearing as before, and sounded like an elder asking a question. Chiyu nodded and said, I have no choice. This is the only way. Xuanyuan's soul sighed and said, such a huge amount of energy is not something your body can bear. I'm afraid the harm it will cause you can't imagine. What's more, what you're going to face is no longer an opponent that humans can fight against. Have you really thought it through? Chiyu smiled and said, Brother Xuanyuan's soul, do you think I'm too impulsive? But I have to do this. I don't think about the big picture, but for the sake of my loved ones on Earth, I have to stop the asteroid from harming Earth. I understand. Go ahead and do it. I don't know how many years it has been, but I can actually feel some fear in the midst of anticipation. The true essence of Xuanyuan's sword has finally blossomed in you. Chiyu, your current state of mind is truly in line with the name Xuanyuan's sword of benevolence. From the tone of Xuanyuan's soul, Chiyu heard an indomitable momentum, and there was also a special feeling. But at this time, there was no time for him to think too much. As the leader of everyone, Chiyu began the final preparations. 12 Zodiac Guardian Warriors, Domain Fusion. With a loud shout, a golden light flashed in Chiyu's hand, and the Xuanyuan's divine sword appeared. The deep golden light made the jade-like light more vibrant. At the same time, the 12 Zodiac Guardian Warriors rose from the back of their golden-winged eagle and floated around Chiyu. At this time, under the traction of energy, Chiyu instantly became their core. The invisible energy attracted them 5 meters away from Chiyu's body. The 12 different ascending cloud technique erupted at the same time, and through their own energy, they connected with Chi-Yu. Although they did not know what Chi-Yu was going to do, they had absolute trust in Chi-Yu, so they gave their energy and life to him. They believed that under Chi-Yu's leadership, they would definitely be the final winner. A faint light flashed, and a cold light flashed in Chi-Yu's eyes. He raised the Xuanyuan's sword above his head, and immediately, the surging energy in his body began to flow into the Xuanyuan sword. At the same time, the Zodiac guardian domain with him as the core began to form. The signs of the Zodiac fuse. As the Xuanyuan's sword lit up, Yamu raised the victory goddess's scepter above her head. With her as the core, the 12 Zodiac guardians immediately moved. Specks of starlight rose from their bodies. Although it was not possible to see how their respective constellations were transferring energy to them from space, the overall increase in their energy aura was extremely obvious. The golden armor covered Yamu's beautiful body, and the victory goddess's scepter was extended, turning into a spear that symbolized battle. The goddess of war and wisdom had awakened at this moment, and the victory goddess's shield that was once destroyed by Chi-Yu had completely recovered. Golden light flashed, protecting in front of her chest. Behind the 12 Zodiac guardians, the light and shadow of their respective constellations appeared. The 12 lights and shadows intertwined, forming a complex symbol under Yamu's body. Just like in Parthenon, the golden light flowed, causing them to suddenly become one. The Pope led the red-robed archbishops, continuously injecting energy into it from the outside. A huge amount of holy power was completely injected into it under the transformation of the origin of nature. Yamu's control was already slightly weaker than the current Chi-Yu. Under the influence of such a huge amount of energy, although she could still maintain a calm expression, fine golden lightning had begun to appear around the Athena's armor. Perhaps only she knew what these lightning bolts signified. Just like the Xuanyuan's sword, the victory goddess's spear lit up with an unprecedented light. The signs of the Zodiac domain began to operate. Even for Chi-Yu, this was the first time he saw this domain, which symbolized the most powerful power in the West, the pinnacle of Athena. The golden light flashed, and Yamu closed her eyes. The golden disc-shaped energy began to spin rapidly, and the domain was completely restrained within the range of this energy. As it continued to increase, the energy fluctuations began to change abnormally. With a flash of light, cracks began to appear around the armor on Yamu's body, but her energy continued to increase. Athena's divinity had already exceeded its limit and was developing in the direction of destruction. On purpose, she led her assistants to stay 10 meters behind Chi-Yu's camp. The golden light began to grow brighter as it continued to spin. Even the light of a small planet could not conceal its incomparably powerful energy aura. A hint of admiration appeared in Chi-Yu's eyes. He did not stop Yamu, because this was something that he and Yamu had already discussed long ago. Every time the tyrannical energy light fluctuated, you would feel that Yamu's power was increasing. At this moment, whether it was him or Yamu, their own power had already exceeded the realm that they could fully control. Chapter 284. After days of contemplation, when Chi-Yu's strength finally reached the 8-cloud level, he finally figured out how to turn his supporting role in the Zodiac Guardian domain into a true attacker. The light and shadow of the 12 Zodiac warriors wrapped around each of the Zodiac Guardian warriors. Behind each of them were the warriors of the 12 Zodiac teams. Each team led the golden-winged eagle that they belonged to and unreservedly transferred their energy into the body of the team leader in front of them, and then into Chi-Yu's body. The entire Zodiac Guardian domain had now expanded. It was also golden and slowly rotating, but its volume was much larger than the signs of the Zodiac domain. At this moment, the two domains that represented the strongest power of the East and the West actually only displayed one ability, and that was amplification, an amplification of energy. As the main searchers of the domain, Chi-Yu and Yamu had both raised this amplification ability to the highest level. The huge energy fluctuations made them the true core, and at the same time, they were also under all the pressure. Separated, Yama moved, and with her, as the core, the signs of the Zodiac domain suddenly separated from Chi-Yu's source of nature. The golden disk, the signs of the Zodiac, 12 Zodiac guardians, all separated with her. In the final rapid rotation, Yamu controlled the domain to throw the 4 red-robed archbishops and His Excellency, the Pope, out of the battle. 12 rays of golden light floated up. It was a silk-like light that outlined a beautiful picture in the air. Athena. Yes, it was the statue of the goddess of war and wisdom, Athena. It was a statue made entirely of golden energy. If one looked at it with their eyes, this statue made entirely of energy was actually more than 100 meters tall, but it was so lifelike. The signs of the Zodiac domain floated up and entered the chest of the huge statue. The domain disappeared, Yamu disappeared, and the 12 Zodiac guardians also disappeared. The huge energy statue of Athena came to life at this moment. His eyes shone with golden light, and his body seemed a little sluggish. An indescribable divine power was completely manifested on this statue that was more than 100 meters tall. A faint light flickered, and her eyes looked so peaceful. The spear of the goddess of victory, a spear that was over 150 meters long, slowly rose. She was no longer flying, but stood there quietly with a calm look in her eyes. He was looking in the direction of the asteroid. At this moment, her appearance had already completely shocked those who could still see. Pope Marty had never thought of this. A person's power could actually expand to such an extent with the help of a god's seat and a domain. A huge amount of energy flickered, and faint energy condensed in the air. The spear of the goddess of victory was raised horizontally, and the divine light of goddess Athena began to burn. That was the burning of all the energy that could be borrowed. Golden light, unusually clear golden light, condensed on the spear of the victory goddess. The asteroid approached very quickly. Faced with the impending collision, Athena had no intention of dodging at all. The golden light finally bloomed when the asteroid was less than 30 kilometers away from her body. On Earth, 30 kilometers was already a long distance, but in space, 30 kilometers could be covered in a flash. The golden light illuminated the space. The golden light pillar with a diameter of 30 meters was like a pillar in the sky, holding up the asteroid that was moving forward. Amidst the loud bang, Goddess Athena's tall body began to tremble violently. Every time she trembled, her body would become a little more illusory. However, the clear, golden energy forcibly withstood the momentum of the asteroid. Although the asteroid was still moving forward, its speed had been reduced to an incredible level. The signs of the Zodiac domain, with the help of the Pope and the Cardinals, Yamu led her companions and used all their energy to contend with the asteroid. Although she could only reduce the asteroid's speed now. Speed and weight had always been the source of power. The asteroid's speed was greatly reduced, so the threat it posed would inevitably be greatly reduced. A faint light flickered, and Chi-Yu's eyes shone with a tyrannical light. He knew that Yamu had done her best. During his discussion with Yamu, Yamu and her companions were responsible for slowing down the asteroid's speed as much as possible. Chi-Yu and his companions were the ones who would cause it to deviate from its orbit. Yamu's perseverance was getting more and more strained. Human power, or rather, divine power, was no match for the vast power of the universe. The huge statue of Athena became more and more illusory, and the golden energy also began to distort. The asteroid, which had slowed down, was still flying normally, but its speed was starting to increase. At that moment, 6 milky white shadows suddenly appeared without warning. At the same time, the 5 people who had been flying around also disappeared. The ones who descended were the 6 archangels. Among these archangels, Chi had seen 4 summoned by the 4 cardinals. As for the 2 strongest archangels that he hadn't seen before, they had been summoned by the Supreme Pontiff. Battle Seraph Michael. Miracle Seraph Gabriel, also known as the Angel of Death. Academic Seraph Raphael, also known as the Angel of Light. Charm Seraph Ania. Defense Seraph Kamal. La Seraph Uriel. 6 milky white lights rose from the 6 archangels. Their figures, under the influence of the huge energy, pounced directly on the asteroid. Just like how hell could not lose its foundation, Earth. The plane where God was also could not lose its foundation, Earth. Therefore, the 6 archangels appeared, although what they were displaying now was still not their full strength. But this was also the greatest strength that heaven could support the human world. The 6 archangels formed a 6-pointed star pattern in the air, and the milky white light was woven under the interaction of the 6 of their 12 palms. The holy energy illuminated everything around them. At the same time, it also ignited their powerful fighting spirit. With Michael as the leader, the 6 seraphs flapped their 6 wings and raised the energy in their bodies to the strongest level. In the next moment, their bodies were already burning with surging white flames. Sacrifice. That backslash is right. It was the Archangel /S sacrifice skill. In order to achieve the maximum energy. In order to help humans resist the asteroid as much as possible, the 6 archangels summoned by the cardinals and the Pope did not hesitate to use the sacrifice skill. 1 black and 1 pink. 2 figures appeared at the same time as they appeared. The black air current and the black wings revealed their identity. The fallen angel Lucifer /S gaze collided with the battle angel Michael /S in the air, and both of them saw something in each other /size. It was as if they were saying that they did not expect to one day be able to stand in the same trench and face the enemy. And at this time, their enemy was a lifeless asteroid. Black energy rose in the mix of pink energy. Although Lucifer and Lunger were only 2 people. But because their energy could be used completely, unlike the fallen angels who could only use part of their energy. Therefore, the energy of the 2 of them was completely comparable to the 6 seraphs who used the sacrifice skill. Black and white energy shot out almost at the same time, although it was not as dazzling as Goddess Athena /S golden light. The different attributes and tyrannical energy were also the strongest power that the 2 completely hostile worlds, heaven and hell, could use. Even in the face of the same enemy, heaven and hell were still competing with each other. The light and dark energies bombarded different directions, but the effects were about the same. The figures of the 6 seraphs disappeared, and the Pope and the 4 cardinals reappeared in space with pale faces. However, the spacesuits on their bodies had also disappeared at this time. Under the illumination of a milky white pearl released by the Pope, they were not affected by the gravitational force of the approaching asteroid. The addition of the power of light and darkness was just a flash in the pan, but the energy that erupted in that instant was extremely powerful. It actually forcibly stopped the asteroid from moving forward. At that moment, the asteroid seemed to have completely stopped, and the energy released by Athena was also in its final burst. It was time. Chiyu moved, but unlike Yamu, he did not lead his Zodiac guardian god warriors to move together. He was the only one who moved. Like a catapult, he suddenly rose from the Zodiac guardian domain. At this moment, all the light released by the Zodiac guardian domain disappeared as he left. There was only one voice that rang in everyone /'s ears. Leave this place. Leave the area that the asteroid could cover. The originally black Kirin armor had been completely dyed golden. Of course, this was not the only color. Silver light bloomed from his eyes, and 3 pairs of wings had already appeared on his back. However, the solar lunisolar star armor was now completely golden. The light of the solar lunisolar star armor shone on Chiyu /S body and the Xianyuan sword. However, if one looked closely, one could see that Chiyu /'s body was currently illusory, and the energy given to him was extremely unstable. Chiyu knew that he could die at any time. It was not because of the small asteroid, but because he had absorbed too much energy. Even the origin of nature could not suppress it. However, this was also what he was looking forward to. Only with enough energy could he achieve his ultimate goal. God, what was a god? A person who possessed power that surpassed humans could be called a god. At this moment, when Chiyu floated to the side of Goddess Athena, he could actually be described as a god. Golden light flowed, and Chi-Yu\S body was also expanding. It was also the amplification of energy. Under the effect of the countless energy in his body and the magical Zodiac guardian domain, his energy was released just like Yamu. When his body spread to a height of 120 meters, all the energy was so concentrated that he had a strong physique that was like a physical body. A body that was 120 meters tall and formed completely from solid energy. What kind of concept was that? Standing next to Goddess Athena, Chi-Yu looked like the strongest god of war. The Xianyuan sword disappeared. It did not expand like the spear of the goddess of victory. The five-colored light flowed around Chi-Yu\S body, making his golden armor look even more dazzling. In fact, if it were not for the energy of the five elements, Chi-Yu would not have been able to hold on. Although there was no powerhouse like the Pope in his camp, it was the combined energy of more than 120 people. There was also the energy of 120 golden-winged eagles. What a frightening number this was. What Chi-Yu had to endure now was unimaginable pain. However, he had to hold on. Before he completed his mission, he had to hold on. The spear of the goddess of victory in Goddess Athena\S hand was trembling. After Lung Air and Lucifer released all their energy, they retreated to the side. The huge body of the small planet began to tremble again. As long as Goddess Athena\S power disappeared, it would start to accelerate again. It up to you. Yamu\S voice sounded like it was constantly trembling. It was completely uncontrollable. The illusory level of Goddess Athena\S body could already be seen. The signs of the Zodiac domain were supporting it. At this time, traces of blood were flowing from the corner of Yamu\S mouth. The huge Chi-Yu left Goddess Athena\S side. The 6 pairs of wings on his back disappeared, and the golden armor disappeared. At this moment, his body became naked again. In his hand, there was only the Xianyuan celestial sword. The golden light turned into a cold lightning and became transparent. Chi-Yu\S body and the Xianyuan celestial sword disappeared at the same time when they were still 5 kilometers away from the small planet. The energy trembled, and a huge silver light suddenly appeared beneath the small planet. The silver light was obviously a sword-shaped energy. The sky suddenly lit up completely. Everything that could be seen seemed to be blooming with all its light. This light was condensed on the body of the silver sword. The huge energy was raised to an indescribable level. The tyrannical energy waves made everyone\S heart tremble. That\S right. What Chi-Yu wanted to do was to use his own power to change the situation in front of him. He wanted to use his own power to change the direction of the small planet. The 7th technique of the Xianyuan 8 techniques, Big Dipper. The true Big Dipper, under the infusion of energy from his companions, and under the situation where Chi-Yu was risking his body to explode, appeared. This was no longer a simple Big Dipper. This was because the energy at this moment had exceeded the maximum level that the Big Dipper could perform. Even if it was used to perform the last technique of the Xianyuan 8 techniques, it would not be impossible. However, what Chi-Yu needed now was not sharpness, but the strongest power of the Xianyuan sword. The Big Dipper was his only choice. In the past, even the creator of the Xianyuan sword would never have imagined that the 7th technique of the Xianyuan sword, Big Dipper, would actually be used on a planet. However, Chi-Yu had chosen to do so. This was his final choice. The silver light became stronger and stronger. The heavy body of the small planet trembled and struggled under the effect of the silver light. At this moment, Goddess Athena\S body suddenly collapsed. Whether it was Yamu or the 12 constellation guardians, blood spurted out of their mouths at the same time. Their life force suddenly plummeted. They could not even control their own bodies and were directly pulled by the gravitational force of the small planet. More than 10 golden lights lit up. Those were more than 10 golden-winged eagles. They caught the bodies of Yamu and the others at the last moment. Before Chi-Yu left, he had already told them, although he would not let go of his hatred towards Yamu, because of this cooperation, he would never abandon his comrades at this time. at the last moment before Yuma fainted. Her eyes were still on the silver sword light. There was a trace of misery on her face. She muttered to herself, Why? Why didn't /T you let me die with you? Wouldn't /T that be the most perfect ending? Yes, even Yamu did not think that Chi-Yu could come back alive. What he was doing now was, after all, an action that could destroy the world. Who could judge how strong he really was? At least Yamu did not know. She did not know to what extent Chi-Yu could do. However, after withstanding such a huge amount of energy, even if he succeeded in the end. However, could his body still support it? What about Chi-Yu? He did not disappear. Instead, he had completely fused with the Xianyuan sword. The silver light did not have any fancy moves or dazzling colors. But when it came into contact with the small planet, the silver light was like a needle next to a basketball. However, it was this needle that embodied the true meaning of the Big Dipper technique. The silver light stirred, and all the energy burst forth at this moment. No one could have imagined that the final result would be like this. However, at the moment when the small planet started moving again, there was a slight fluctuation in the direction it was flying. No one knew whether Chi-Yu had succeeded or not. The last thing that everyone saw was the breaking of the silver light. It was all because of that silver light. Yes, it broke. The small planet flew away. The space soldiers who were still conscious flew towards the direction where the silver light broke. At the front of the group were Chi-Yu /S confidants. There were no tears because they did not have the time to cry. No one had expected the scene in front of them to happen. In fact, Chi-Yu could have led the entire Zodiac army and completed the final Big Dipper technique with the help of everyone /S energy. However, he did not do so. He had said that if anyone from the Zodiac army died during the course of this mission, he would be the first to die. He had given up on using more energy. In order to protect the safety of everyone in the Zodiac army, he had chosen to fight alone. Yes, in the end, the battle with the small planet was a battle between Chi-Yu and Yamu. As the core of the entire plan, they were undoubtedly under the greatest pressure. What Yamu did was to slow down the speed of the small planet as much as possible. What Chi-Yu did was to change the trajectory of the small planet after it stopped moving. Now, no one cared about whether Chi-Yu had succeeded or not. All they wanted to do was to find the whereabouts of the Zodiac King. The golden light attracted everyone /S attention. They saw the Xianyuan sword. That /S, right? It was the Xianyuan sword. At this time, the Xianyuan sword was still glowing faintly. However, this golden light was gradually fading. The Big Dipper technique broke at the last moment. At the same time, the Xianyuan sword also broke. In this world, nothing was absolute. The Xianyuan sword was no exception. It also had a limit. This was also why the Xianyuan soul had sounded strange when it had asked Chi-Yu if he wanted to do that. When it had sensed Chi-Yu /S energy fluctuations, the Xianyuan soul had already known that if Chi-Yu had really done that, the final outcome would have been his own destruction. However, it had still chosen to support Chi-Yu. One man and one sword. At the last moment, at the cost of their own bodies, they had finally completed the indelible power of the sword. The Xianyuan sword was broken into 2 smooth pieces. Everyone looked at it with a trace of deep sorrow in their eyes. Chi-Yu /S body had disappeared. He wasn't /T beside the Xianyuan sword. Everyone knew that if he was still here, he wouldn't /T have given up on his best partner. Even if the Xianyuan sword had broken, he wouldn't /T. Silence. The outer space had become silent again. Everyone /S eyes were focused on the broken Xianyuan sword. Their minds were almost in a blank state. Even the Pope, who had hoped that Chi-Yu would die, couldn't /T help but feel a deep sorrow in his heart. He didn't /T know why, but there was only respect left in his heart for Chi-Yu. A respect that would never change. Ryue /S hand were trembling. She slowly came to the front of the Xianyuan sword. At this moment, the Xianyuan sword was no longer golden. What was left was only a black iron sword. A broken iron sword. It was heavy in her hand. There was no trace of spiritual energy. The Xianyuan sword was finished. The Xianyuan sword ranked second in the 10 great artifacts of the East, was finished just like that. Where was Chiyu? Was Chiyu dead? There seemed to be no need to consider this question anymore. After all, in this entire space, there was no sign of him. Everyone was silent. They couldn't /T say a word. At this moment, they couldn't /T even be sad. With Ryue as the leader, Chiyu /S confidence. Their pretty faces had turned gray. The light in their eyes was frozen. No one could make any more movements. The spacecraft, unbeknownst to them, had come to the side of these sluggish people. The belly of the spacecraft opened. The space soldiers who were still wearing spacesuits heard an excited voice. Warriors, although I don't /T know how you did it, you /V become the heroes of mankind. Now, welcome back, our heroes. Ryue said to herself in a daze. Did it succeed? It seems to be successful. But yes, Chiyu succeeded in the end, although the asteroid was still not destroyed. However, the direction it was moving in had deviated from its original direction by 3 degrees. Looking at it from a close distance, 3 degrees didn't /T seem to be much. However, based on the current distance between the asteroid and Earth, it was quite significant. Now, it would not collide with Earth at all. This huge crisis of mankind. It also disappeared in the last moment of Chiyu /S Big Dipper. But what about our human heroes? Was Chiyu really dead? No, the answer was not certain. When Chiyu had released all his energy at the last moment, he had indeed thought that he was going to die. Because at the same time, every meridian in his body had ruptured inch by inch. He could no longer endure the danger brought by the enormous amount of energy. Energy surged out. When the last bit of energy disappeared, his body exploded and he died. Chiyu didn't /T think much at this time. He just hoped that his death could be meaningful and not in vain. Time didn't /T allow him to think too much. At the last moment of explosion, at the moment when the Xianyuan's sword broke, Chiyu /his mind went blank. He calmly waited for death to come. However, death didn't /T come to his body. The huge gravitational force on the asteroid directly pulled his body over. At this moment, a warm and strong energy instantly enveloped every part of Chiyu /his body, allowing him to easily pass through the asteroid /S atmosphere. Although the huge energy wave couldn't /T repair Chiyu /S meridian, it forcibly kept his body in its original state and wouldn't /T be destroyed again. The final crazy explosion of the combined energy was also stopped by this sudden energy wave. It forcibly saved Chiyu /S life. This is the second time. This is the second thing I /V done for you. The Bull Demon King said in a low voice. There seemed to be a hint of strangeness in his voice. Chiyu was very calm. Although all the energy in his body had been released because of the Big Dipper, his mental strength was still there. This is the second thing I /V done. I didn't /T ask you to do it. The muscles on Chiyu /S face twitched a little, and he revealed a faint smile. The Bull Demon King said in a low voice, Is that really the case? If I hadn't /T helped you at the last moment, you might not have been able to successfully change the trajectory of that asteroid. In addition, I /V save your life. ISN /T this considered doing something for you? Aren't your demands a little too high? Chiyu was stunned for a moment. Then he said with great joy, Really? The asteroid has really deviated from its original trajectory? The Bull Demon King sighed and said, I didn't /T expect that there would be such a foolish person like you in this world. You would sacrifice yourself for the life of others. Chiyu smiled and said, No, this ISN /T foolishness. If the Earth is finished, wouldn't /T I be finished too? This is saving myself, just like how you saved me, an original enemy. But it / also because of the domain of life and death between us. The Bull Demon King /S huge body appeared in front of Chiyu. He lifted Chiyu /S body with one hand and looked at him coldly. He couldn't /T speak for a long time. He really did not have the courage to kill Chiyu. Although his heart was filled with murderous intent, He had to endure it for the sake of his own life. What should we do now? Without a spacecraft, it seems difficult to go back. Chiyu asked subconsciously. The bull demon king snorted and said, in your current state, you can /T go anywhere. After traveling in space for a long time, even my energy will be exhausted. We can only rest first. When your body recovers a little, we /LL think of a way to return to Earth. Wasn't /T this asteroid going to hit Earth? Even if it doesn't /T hit now, when it flies to a certain extent, the distance between it and Earth will close. At that time, we /LL think of a way to leave here and fly back to Earth. Chiyu looked at the bull demon king, dumbfounded. Even he didn't /T think of flying in space with just his body, but it came out of the bull demon king /S mouth. From the looks of it, it didn't /T seem like this was the first time he /D done such a flight. What was the origin of this mysterious king of beasts? At least he couldn't /TB the bull demon king mentioned in the journey to the west. The surrounding air suddenly solidified. The strong energy impact caused Chiyu to spit out a mouthful of blood. The bull demon king /S energy quickly increased, protecting Chiyu /S body. At this time, Chiyu found that he and the bull demon king had landed on the asteroid. Around them, there were all kinds of strong radiation energy. These were obviously caused by tens of thousands of nuclear bombs. Although the entire asteroid wasn't /T destroyed, it had become a piece of scorched earth. Even if there had been life on this asteroid in the past, after the baptism of tens of thousands of nuclear bombs, there wouldn't /T be anything left. This was the inevitable result. Feeling the radiation around him, the bull demon king frowned. Energy surged out of his body. Without the energy of the source of nature, he couldn't /T be like Chiyu, who could absorb all kinds of energy that he wasn't /T used to and convert it into his own energy. In the vast universe, this had become his biggest restriction. The bull demon king flew up again with Chiyu, flying quickly in the air hundreds of meters above the surface of the asteroid. Soon, he found a depression in the ground where the radiation was relatively less. He immediately floated down with Chiyu. The giant spirit palm brought with it a huge amount of energy, blasting a big hole in the ground in an instant. It had to be said that the structure of this asteroid was too solid. Even with the bull demon king /S strength, it took him 3 palms to blast a hole that could accommodate 2 people. Chapter 285. What are you looking at? Hurry up and cultivate. You need to understand that right now, I can only protect myself. If you can't recover your strength, I won't be able to take you out of here, said the bull demon king after glaring at Chiyu. Chiyu forced a smile and said, I'm really not used to your concern. But sometimes, you don't seem to be that annoying after all. There's a problem that I don't know if you've thought about. Even if I can recover my strength, how are we going to determine the position of Earth on this small planet? Even if the 2 of us have the ability to pass through the atmosphere without a specific position, are we going to just keep flying? What if we can't find Earth? Hearing Chiyu's question, Bull Demon King snorted disdainfully and said, That's just what you think. Don't use your insignificant strength to compare with mine. In this world, as long as we are still in the solar system, no matter where we are, I can find the position of Earth. You don't have to worry about this. Just hurry up and heal your injuries. I'm not good at healing, so I can only maintain your current condition. What you can do now is to save yourself. With the level of your natural source of energy, it doesn't seem too difficult. Chiyu smiled bitterly and said, Is it really not difficult? If that's the case, I'll be glad. The meridians in your body are completely shattered, and it's not easy to rebuild them. It requires a huge amount of energy to maintain it. The Xianyuan sword is destroyed. Brother Xianyuan's soul didn't tell me until the last moment. In fact, it couldn't withstand the gravity at that time. Aren't you happy? I don't have any weapons to threaten you anymore. Bull Demon King, of course, wouldn't tell Chiyu that although he helped Chiyu shift the orbit of the small planet at the last moment, it was also because of his full strength. But it was also because of his full strength that the cracks on the Xianyuan sword turned into cracks. He snorted and said, You are gauging the heart of a gentleman with your own mean measure. According to my calculations, this small planet will reach its closest point to Earth in about 5 Earth days. You should work hard to recover. I can use energy to help you. But without my help, it will be very difficult for you to return to Earth, so I can only use part of my power to help you. Let's begin. As he spoke, the Bull Demon King sat behind Chi-Yu. The energy in his body circulated rapidly and slowly entered Chi-Yu's body. However, when his energy entered Chi-Yu's body along with his mental strength, he immediately realized that something was wrong. How could this be? The Bull Demon King retracted his hands, dumbfounded. Chi-Yu looked at him with a smile and said calmly, "Why not? All the meridians in my body are done for. The spring of life will naturally develop in the direction of drying up. The spring of nature is already silent, unless you can have another Emperor Heart Snow Lotus King. Otherwise, it would be almost impossible to wake it up." "No, that's impossible," Bull Demon King roared. "I'm willing to do my best to help you. Chi-Yu, you cannot die." Chi-Yu smiled at the Bull Demon King and said helplessly, "Do you think I want to die? I still have so many beautiful wives at home waiting for me to return. But now it has become like this. Even if I don't want to die, it's no longer up to me. Accept your fate, Bull Demon King. Dying with me seems to be a good thing. At least, I've taken away another hidden danger on Earth. I think my companions will have a much easier time dealing with other dangers in the future. What do you think?" The Bull Demon King looked at Chi-Yu, his breathing uneven. His eyes had already turned blood red, and his heart was filled with infinite fear. He was very clear that if Chi-Yu really died, under the effect of the life and death domain, he would not be able to survive. If that was all, he was not the most upset. What he could not accept was that he had already thought of a way to break this domain, but he could not do it now. As long as he could return to Earth, he would definitely have a chance to break free from the shackles that Chi-Yu had placed on him. No, there must be a way. Chi-Yu, you're a genius among humans. Quickly think of a way. I don't want to die. I know that you don't want to die either, right? I beg you. Chi-Yu, quickly think of a way. I will do anything you want me to, as long as you don't die." Seeing the Bull Demon King begging him, the smile on Chi-Yu's face deepened. Even the King of Beasts would have such a day, begging for his life. It seemed that his death was not unjust. The Bull Demon King's feeling of Chi-Yu's body was not wrong. Due to the excessive energy explosion, Chi-Yu's source of nature was greatly depleted. It was not something that could be recovered in a short period of time, and his body did not have the chance to wait any longer. Even with the support of the Bull Demon King's energy, it could only last for less than a day. If the Bull Demon King withdrew his energy now, or if Chi-Yu's spiritual power collapsed along with his body a day later, he would be deader than dead. Just as Chi-Yu was about to mock the Bull Demon King, a sorrowful voice suddenly sounded in his mind. "Quickly agree to it. You won't die yet. At least, you won't be split in half like that old fellow Xinyuan Han." This sorrowful voice shocked Chi-Yu, but he quickly recognized that this voice came from the Kongtong Seal's seal spirit. "Elder Seal Spirit, what do you mean?" The Kongtong Seal sighed. The breaking of the Xinyuan sword was a huge blow to it as well. As one of the 10 great divine weapons, it and the Xinyuan sword had been partners for many years. How could it not be sad? There's no need to say more. I have a way to let you live and recover to your original state. Have you forgotten my title? The Kongtong Seal is known as the Immortal Seal. Do you think that the immortal domain is that simple? It's just that it needs enough energy to be used to its fullest potential. Moreover, you're not completely dead. All you need to do is maintain your current state and wait for the magical source of nature in your body to awaken. When a person thought that he was going to die, he would either be scared to death or face it calmly. Chi-Yu was undoubtedly the latter. However, when a person who thought that he was going to die suddenly obtained a chance to live, that kind of surprise was irresistible to anyone, and Chi-Yu was no exception. With the sudden hope of living, all kinds of fantasies immediately appeared in his mind. He could totally imagine how much sorrow his death would bring to Ruyue and the rest. He just didn't want to think about it before. But now that he had a chance to live, How could he not have other thoughts? In an instant, all kinds of hopes increased, and the way he looked at the Bull Demon King also began to change. Old Bull, are you really willing to help me wholeheartedly? Fortunately, Chi still had some level of control over his emotions, and the Bull Demon King was currently in a state of panic, so he didn't notice the change in him. Of course, I'm willing to help you. I'm willing to use all my strength to help you, as long as you don't die. That's good. Start transferring your energy to me again. Press your hand on the Kong Tong seal and transfer your energy as gently as possible into the Kong Tong seal. However, you must remember, without my permission, you must not stop transferring your energy. Otherwise, all your previous efforts will be wasted. Do you understand? The Bull Demon King was overjoyed when he heard that Chi Yu might not die. He hurriedly nodded, and without the slightest bit of hesitation, he immediately pressed his right hand on Chi Yu's chest. Energy surged out, and under his control, it gently poured into the Kong Tong seal. A faint light flickered, and the energy of the 5 elements floated out under the Bull Demon King's energy, enveloping Chi Yu's body in a 5-colored light. It was the undying domain. It had to be said that the Bull Demon King was extremely powerful. Even at his peak, when Chi Yu reached the 8-cloud realm, he was still no match for the Bull Demon King. Under the support of the Bull Demon King's enormous energy, the undying domain of the Kong Tong seal released an unprecedented amount of energy. The faint light flickered, and every time it flickered, Chi Yu felt strange. This time, the undying domain didn't just wrap around his body, it also entered his body. What made Chi Yu feel strange was that although his meridians were broken and the energy in his body was exhausted, under the effect of the undying domain's energy of the 5 elements, his body's functions seemed to have started operating again. His meridians maintained their cracked state, but they weren't broken. Every crack was blocked by the energy of the 5 elements, allowing his blood to flow normally again. His body's functions and self-healing abilities were starting to show their effects. Chi Yu didn't move. He knew that although his spiritual power still existed, he couldn't control anything. He could only rely on his body's slow recovery. Only when the energy of the origin of nature was rejuvenated could he control the energy of the origin of nature to repair his body in all aspects, and then filter the surrounding energy to restore his strength. This couldn't be done in one go. It needed a period of time. Fortunately, with the support of the Bull Demon King's powerful energy, the undying domain could maintain the state of Chi Yu's body. What was needed now was a long period of time. Whether it was Chi Yu or the Bull Demon King, they could only wait quietly. Under the summoning of the Yin Spirit, Chi Yu's spiritual power entered the Kong Tong seal. Waiting was lonely. The Yin Spirit brought Chi Yu to his own world. Chi Yu was surprised to find that he had returned to the 5 Elements Mountain. Is it strange? As long as I want to, I can put the 5 elements in my own world. The Yin Spirit floated out. His face was no longer calm, and his deep eyes flickered with deep sorrow. Thank you, Senior Yin Spirit, Chi said respectfully. The Yin Spirit shook his head and said, You don't need to thank me. To be honest, you are my master, and I should save you. However, Chi, I hope you could do me a favor, okay? It's also to help yourself. Chi was stunned for a moment and said, What kind of favor? If I can do it, I will definitely do it. The Yin Spirit's eyes revealed a trace of sadness. That old fella, Xin Yuan Han, is finished. He was my best friend, although we haven't seen each other for many years. But I still know that he still exists in the human world. However, now that the Xin Yuan sword is broken, Xin Yuan Han's spirituality has dissipated in the sword. I hope you can recast the Xin Yuan sword. Chi Yu's body shook. Even in the spiritual world, his tears still flowed. Now that he calmed down, the first thing he thought of was Xin Yuan Han. After Yin Spirit's reminder, he realized that the arrogant big brother Xin Yuan Han was really dead. Before this, he still had a fluke in his heart, because he knew that although he had disappeared, Ru Yue and the others would definitely bring the Xin Yuan sword back to Earth. At that time, as long as he could go back and put the Xin Yuan sword back into his body, he might be able to restore the Xin Yuan sword. But after hearing Yin Spirit's words, it was obviously not so simple. Ean's spirit saw through Chiyu's thoughts, shook his head, and said, "That's impossible. The 10 great artifacts can be said to be the gods of the East in the human world. They're different from the so-called artifacts of the West. Those so-called artifacts of the West are at most a little stronger than your Kirin treasure. With their own energy, they can recover no matter how damaged they are. But it's impossible for Xianyuan Hun and me to recover like that. It's indeed extremely difficult to destroy us, but it's equally difficult to recover after we're destroyed. Chiyu, are you willing to help me?" Shaking his head, Chiyu looked at Ean's spirit's changed expression and said, "Senior, this is not to help you, but to help myself. If it weren't for the Xianyuan sword, I don't know how many times I would have died. Big brother Xianyuan Hun has helped me countless times. If it weren't for him this time, I'm afraid that Earth would be facing an irreversible crisis. No matter the reason, even if it's just for myself, I'll definitely find a way to recast the Xianyuan sword and wake up Big Brother Xianyuan Han." Ean's spirit laughed. "You call him Big Brother, but you call me Senior. Don't you think it's estranged? Just call me the same. But have you thought about how to recast the Xianyuan sword? As one of the 10 great divine artifacts, both Xianyuan Han and Ean's spirit were very arrogant. Due to various reasons, the Kongtong seal had recognized Chiyu as its master. However, it was only now that Ean's spirit truly recognized Chiyu. Although the Kongtong seal's ranking was not very high, if Ean's spirit had already recognized Chiyu, how could the Kongtong seal's application be so simple? I was just about to ask. Chiyu looked at Ean's spirit expectantly. Ean's spirit said seriously, "As the most offensive divine artifact in the world, it's extremely difficult to recast the Xianyuan sword. First of all, you must find the heavenly fire to recast the Xianyuan sword. Only the heavenly fire can meld it and reform it. At the same time, it's not enough to recast the Xianyuan sword. Without the Xianyuan soul, it can't become the real Xianyuan divine sword. Therefore, you must awaken the Xianyuan soul with your heart's blood. Recasting the Xianyuan sword and awakening the Xianyuan soul may sound simple, but it's extremely difficult to actually do it. You must be mentally prepared." Chiyu nodded and said, "Then what is the heavenly fire?" Ean's spirit said indifferently. As the name suggests, the flame of heaven is the real heavenly fire. Don't ask me where to find it, because I don't know either. I only know the situation when the Xianyuan sword was first cast. You don't need to find any materials now, but you need the heavenly fire. Besides, you need a huge amount of energy as the backup to completely stimulate the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword. Only in this case can you make the Xianyuan sword reappear and make all the 10 great artifacts intact. Do you understand?" Chiyu's heart sank when he heard Ean's spirit's words. Although Ean's spirit had told him the method, what was the so-called heavenly fire? How could he find it? Without the heavenly fire, he couldn't recast the Xianyuan sword, which was too difficult for him. However, the difficulty didn't dampen Chiyu's determination. He nodded firmly. He had decided to immediately find the heavenly fire after he returned to Earth and dealt with a few things, so as to recast the Xianyuan sword in the shortest time possible. Ean's spirit could see many things from Chiyu's expression. She couldn't help but reveal a trace of gratification in her eyes. She nodded to him and said, "While your body is in a state of recovery, you should talk to it carefully. After all, you have now reached the top state of Kirin." Before Chiyu could react, a familiar aura floated out. A familiar breath floated out. Wasn't that the appearance of the divine steed, Xieji? It was his own shadow. "Brother Xieji, why are you here?" Chiyu asked in surprise. Xieji smiled and said, "Why can't I be here? The Kongtong seal is the world's treasure. Senior Ean's spirit gave me permission to practice in it. That's why it was difficult for you to find my whereabouts before. Chiyu, you have now become an 8-cloud Ink Kirin. In other words, your strength is equivalent to an ordinary Ink Kirin's 9-cloud strength. You can now have all the abilities of an ordinary 9-cloud Ink Kirin." Chiyu said with some doubts, "But I still can't use the 3rd stage of origin alienation?" Xieji said, "That's the only exception. It's the only ability you don't have yet. However, You already have the other abilities. Haven't you noticed it? She nodded. He said, "It seems that when my strength suddenly improved, there seemed to be a lot more things in my mind, which are the various abilities of Kieran that you mentioned. It's just that I was about to face the asteroid crisis at that time, and I didn't have time to experience it." Siaji smiled and said, "These days, after I screened all the abilities of Kieran, I chose the most suitable combination for you. Too many abilities are of no use to you. What you have now is nothing. What you have now is what you need most. According to your 4 attributes of Thundercloud Force, your current skills are no longer single, but a fusion skill. In the case of mutual enhancement and restraint, the 4 different Thundercloud Force can be combined with each other, assist each other, or use the relationship of mutual enhancement to enhance, or use the relationship of mutual restraint to erupt in repulsion. You have to understand these as soon as possible. Now that you don't have the assistance of Senior Xinyuan, you have to rely on your own strength for a period of time in the future." While listening to Xieji, Chiyu's spiritual imprint constantly flashed a wonderful ability. Although it was just a simple feeling, Chiyu could also find how powerful the power contained in it was. "Brother Xieji, thank you." Chiyu knew that if it wasn't for Xieji sorting out the abilities he needed in his body, even if he reached the 9-cloud level, it would take a long time to have these suitable abilities, and they may not be useful. Xieji smiled and said, "You are my master. There is nothing to thank me for. However, these abilities are not the most beneficial help for you after you reach the 8-cloud level. There is another ability that you need the most now, and it is the most useful ability to increase your own strength." Chiyu was stunned and said, "The most useful ability? What is it?" Xieji smiled mysteriously, and its eyes were shining. "Remember what I once told you, when Kieran reaches the 9-cloud level. What will happen?" Chiyu's heart skipped a beat, and he cried out, "Domain! Is it a domain?" Emohua once told him that when Kieran reached the 9-cloud level, he would have his own origin domain, which was also his most powerful ability. This domain was different according to the strength of one's own strength. For example, Emohua's domain was teleportation, but what about his own? At the thought of the domain, Chiyu's heart subconsciously became hot. When one's strength reached a certain level, the application of abilities became extremely important, especially the skills of the domain. Whether it was the Zodiac protection domain, his 1,000 opportunities and 100 changes Xuanji boundary technique, and Silver Dragon cover, they all belonged to the category of domain, and all of them had powerful effects. If he could have another domain, then it would be of great benefit to the enhancement of his strength. Xiaoweng nodded and said, "Yes, it is a domain." Chiyu quickly calmed down and said with some doubts, "But I can't even carry out the 3rd stage of origin mutation now. How can there be a domain that only appears in the 9-cloud level for Kieran? Moreover, I don't feel anything myself." Xiaoweng smiled and said, "Of course you don't feel anything. Even I only understood what the domain that appeared in your body is after you were seriously injured this time." Chiyu could not wait and said, "Brother Xiaoweng, tell me, what is it?" Xiaoweng said, "First of all, your strength has reached the strength equivalent to the 9-cloud level Kieran, so your domain will inevitably appear. Because you are the unprecedented 4 auspicious clouds, Ink Kieran. This has made you beyond the scope of Kieran. As for whether you can really advance to the 9-cloud level, I am not sure. But I can foresee that. If you want to carry out the 3rd stage of origin mutation, you must reach your 9-cloud level. At that time, your origin mutation will be much stronger than any Kieran. Now that you have the origin domain that appears in the 9-cloud level, it does not mean that it is your final origin domain. I thought about it carefully for a long time. I was surprised to find that if you can finally reach your own 9-cloud level, then you are likely to have 2 9-cloud domains. This has never happened in the history of Kieran, but it is very likely to happen to you. Because you now have a lot of energy and skills that do not belong to Kieran. What will happen at that time? I am afraid even the heavens do not know. It depends on the situation of your own energy combination. Now, if you want to know what the domain you have is, you must see someone. You will understand when you see him. Without waiting for Chi Yu to ask again, A faint figure had floated out from behind Xiaowang. Seeing this person, Qiyu could not help but be stunned, because what he saw turned out to be himself. Brother Xiaowang, Xiaowang did not say anything. He just flashed aside and looked at the two Qiyu in front of him with a smile. But the one who appeared later in front of Qiyu spoke. What? You can't even feel my aura? The soft smile looked a little more charming, which made Qiyu feel very strange. However, from the pleasant voice, he immediately realized who the owner of the voice was. Ting Ting, it's you, is it really you? Qiyu asked in surprise. Yes, that voice was Wen Ting's. While smiling, Wen Ting's body shook and changed back to her original appearance. A fiery red dress covered her graceful and delicate body, floating in front of Qiyu. Her charming appearance was especially lovable. Isn't it me? Qiyu rushed up with his fastest speed. Although he was now in a spiritual form, the spiritual body was not limited by the physical body. Wen Ting was also in a spiritual form. Their spiritual powers were combined in such a situation, hugging each other tightly. Although there was no physical temperature, the spiritual fusion still made Qiyu so excited that he could not speak. He could feel that the current Wen Ting was not as weak as when he talked to her last time. It seemed that her soul must have been completely condensed. In the future, he could communicate with Wen Ting in his heart at any time. That's great, Ting Ting. Do you know how worried I have been about you these days? You finally appeared. That's great. I thought. You thought that my soul had dissipated? Don't worry, I still have to look after you on behalf of my sisters. How can it dissipate so easily? Like Brother Xieji, I was invited by Senior Yinling to cultivate in this 5 elements world. If it wasn't for Senior Yinling just informing us of your current situation, I'm afraid we would not have met. Qiyu hugged Wen Ting's delicate body tightly. He could not help but be secretly grateful to Yinling. He knew that the realm of immortality of the Kongtong seal must be the biggest reason why Wen Ting's spiritual power could recover so well. Ting Ting, what do I need to do to resurrect you? Wen Ting shook her head gently and said, You can't do it now. Maybe when you reach the 9 clouds level, you can. There was a trace of disappointment in Qiyu's eyes. He smiled bitterly and said, But Master Zigru told me that I am afraid I will not be able to reach the 9 clouds level in this life. That is not the power that can be improved in our world. My current strength has reached a certain level. It is extremely difficult to break through. The Xieji said, Difficult does not mean impossible. Qiyu, if you don't even have confidence in yourself, then that is the true tragedy. After listening to Xieji's words, Qiyu could not help but feel refreshed. He nodded and said, Yes, I must work hard. Even if there's only a small possibility, I will work hard to restore my own strength. Ting Ting, you wait. One day, I will let you reappear in the world. Wen Ting said, Let's not talk about this. Although I can't be resurrected now, at least we can be together. You can hear my voice and see my face. Is that not enough? People can't be too greedy. See your face? Do you mean that when I want to see you in the future, I only need to enter the Kongtong seal? Qiyu asked. Wen Ting shook her head and said, How can that work? Unless it is under extremely special circumstances, your spiritual power cannot leave your body. Otherwise, once you encounter danger, your body will not have spiritual control, and you will suffer an irreparable blow. When I said see, I don't mean this. Do you still remember how I appeared just now? Can you guess why I became like you? Qiyu was stunned for a moment. He looked at Wen Ting and then looked at Xieji, who was smiling and silent. His mind turned quickly. Because of the appearance of Wen Ting just now, he had forgotten about the territory. Now that he thought about it, he couldn't help but have some understanding in his heart. He murmured, Is my original territory related to you? Wen Ting smiled and nodded. Smart. Our minds are connected. When your original territory appeared, Brother Xieji reminded me, and I directly joined your territory. As for what is going on, let Brother Xieji tell you. He can say it more clearly. Looking at Qiyu's puzzled eyes, Xieji said, It's like this. The original territory you have is called the Doppelganger territory. Among all the original territories that have appeared in Kirin, the Doppelganger territory is undoubtedly the most powerful one. Only Ink Kirin the doppelganger territory, which has appeared before, has shown such power. Even Miss Wenting's father did not have the doppelganger territory, but now it has appeared on you. Doppelganger territory? What is its effect? After listening to Xieji's words, Qiyu's heartbeat couldn't help but speed up. Xieji said, as the name implies, once the doppelganger territory is cast, then in the process of battle, it is equivalent to having two you. The you that you created isn't just a simple shadow clone. In addition to not being able to use the various weapons that you have, his ability is exactly the same as yours. Even the energy intensity is the same. Imagine if, in the middle of a battle, one of you suddenly becomes two. What kind of situation would occur? Chapter 286. Xie said sternly, "Don't be happy too early. The doppelganger domain is good. However, it also has its shortcomings. First of all, your doppelganger does not have wisdom. It can only fight by instinct and attack the enemy according to your simple instructions. In a situation where you can't specifically control it, its combat power is far from being comparable to your own. After all, it is just a doppelganger and does not have a soul. Secondly, because the doppelganger has no wisdom, after you separate it with the power of the domain, it can't use the weapons you have. Because if you're not facing an extremely powerful enemy, you can't use this domain. Therefore, when fighting, you can't have too high expectations for it. This doppelganger can only be your meat shield most of the time." After listening to Xieji's words, Qiyu couldn't help but frown. If it was as he said, then the magic of the doppelganger domain would be greatly limited. Seeing that Qiyu was lost in thought, Xieji and Wenting looked at each other and smiled. Wenting said, "It is because of these two biggest shortcomings that when Brother Xieji discovered that your domain is a doppelganger domain, he has found a way to help you make up for it." The domain can be made up? Qiyu looked at them dully. Xieji said, "It is not possible. However, your domain has just appeared, and it has not yet been fully formed. Moreover, your doppelganger domain has not really been used. This enabled me to help you perfect it at that moment. So, what you have now can be said to be the perfect doppelganger domain." Qiyu looked at Xie in surprise. "Brother, how did you do it?" Xieji smiled and said, "In fact, it's very simple. I just helped you to inject a soul into this doppelganger." Inject a soul. In an instant, Qiyu suddenly understood and turned his eyes to Wenting. "Ting, it's you, right?" Wenting nodded with a smile and said, "Yes. That's why I said that you can see me in the future." Xieji said, "You could be considered to have unique luck. If there was no Miss Wenting, it's just that I can't become a soul. Because in a sense, my body did not disappear. Therefore, my spirit cannot leave your body and appear outside. Otherwise, my soul will immediately scatter and I will die. However, Miss Wenting is different. She has already lost her physical body, and her soul has condensed in your body. Once you use the doppelganger skill, you will be able to escape. Her soul could be injected into it." Miss Wenting's combat skills were much stronger than the doppelgangers, which only relied on instinct to fight. Moreover, Miss Wenting was intelligent. Therefore, she can also use your weapon. To put it simply, other than the Xinyuan sword and the Kong Tong seal, because Miss Wenting is a clone created through a domain, her aura will be the same as yours. Therefore, you can let her use the Kirin's octatic treasures. In this way, the doppelganger domain was perfected. What Miss Wenting possesses is equivalent to all of your combat power. Excitement. Apart from excitement, Qiyu really had no other feelings. The doppelganger domain, this was simply amazing for him. What surprised him even more was that this domain could not only greatly enhance his strength, but at the same time, it could also allow him to see Wenting at all times. This was the most important thing for him. In the future, as long as he wanted to see Wenting, he only needed to open his own true image domain. For Qiyu, this was undoubtedly great news. Xieji said, "Qiyu, I have to remind you of one thing. The ability of the doppelganger domain is so powerful, which inevitably means that it needs a huge amount of energy as a backing to be used. Simply put, using the doppelganger domain once is basically equivalent to using the first style of the Xianyuan sword, unity of man and nature. Moreover, this can only maintain the doppelganger domain for 5 seconds. If you want to make it last longer, you need more energy. Therefore, when you remove the doppelganger domain, I am afraid that you will be extremely weak. Therefore, it must not be used easily unless it is a very critical moment. This domain will be your last trump card. Do you understand? Understood. Of course, Chiyu understood. With the Kanton Seal's undying domain, he once cut off one of Chiyu's arms. The wonders of the undying domain were important, but the suddenness was equally important. He did not give Chiyu a chance to react at all, so he could succeed in one fell swoop. With such a super doppelganger domain that could double his strength at any time, Chiyu would certainly not use it easily. He had secretly thought about it. There were only a few people who would really use this domain to deal with, such as the great demon King Satan, who might appear in the future, and the bull demon king, who was helping him heal outside. Except for the super strong of their level, in this world, there was no one who needed to double their strength to fight. After reaching the 8 cloud level, even Yamu and the Pope could no longer compare with Chiyu. After Siaji said a few more words to Chiyu, it quietly left, leaving this quiet space to Wen-Ting and Chiyu. At this moment, Chiyu even hoped that his body's recovery speed could be slower so that he could take advantage of this opportunity to stay with Wen-Ting for a while. Ting-Ting, it's all my fault. If I hadn't been fooled by Yamu, you wouldn't have become like this. Letting Wen-Ting lean on his chest, Chiyu said softly. Among his confidants, he felt the most apologetic towards Wen-Ting. Wen-Ting gently shook her head and said, "Personality determines the way you do things. You are a very emotional person. You are very emotional, which is what I like. If you could keep calm at all times and prioritize your own interests, you wouldn't have been able to save me with the ultimate Chilan arm back then, would you? If you hadn't saved me, how could I have appeared in time this time? So, everything is predetermined. You don't have to think too much. There's nothing wrong with this now. After all, I'm not really dead. It's just that Snow Girl is too pitiful. Her only relative also died to save you." Chiyu sighed and said, "Ting-Ting, I'm sorry. I'm afraid I can no longer treat Snow Girl as my daughter." "I understand. You don't have to explain. Although I can't see what you're doing outside. However, what Emperor Heart Snow Lotus King told you before he died was not to let you treat Snow Girl as your daughter. What Snow Girl needs is not another father, but a man's love. And you are obviously the best choice. As Ink Kirin of the 4 auspicious clouds, you have long been destined not to be a woman's husband. You already have Ruyue, Ming Ming, and the others. I can afford a few more. What's more, in my current state, if I don't have them to take care of you, how can I be at ease?" Wen-Ting was always so sensible. Holding her delicate body tightly, Chiyu was even more determined to improve his strength, no matter how difficult it was. He must reach the 9 clouds level and resurrect Wen-Ting. Otherwise, how could he be worthy of her deep love for him? His love kept gushing out with a tinge of guilt, tightly wrapping around the lovely girl in his arms. Good times were always short. When the Een spirit appeared again and told Chiyu that it was time to go out to take care of the overall situation of his body, time seemed to have passed only for a moment. But it wasn't just an instant. A faint light flickered. Chiyu's eyes revealed a trace of sadness. He held Wen-Ting's hand reluctantly. Under Wen-Ting's repeated urging, he was sent out of the beautiful 5 elements world by the Een spirit. When he returned to his body, the first thing Chiyu felt was an intense pain. The warmth in his heart suddenly turned into excruciating pain, causing his spiritual force to contract. However, Chiyu also knew that pain was the best sign. At least it proved that his meridians had recovered to a certain extent. Otherwise, where'd the pain come from? Sure enough, the body that had been transformed by the source of nature was extremely powerful. Under the effect of the immortal realm, Chiyu's meridians were already in the process of rapid growth and connection. Although it still needed some time, the current situation was much better than before. What made Chiyu even happier was that the source of nature had awakened again. The faint green light had turned into a stream of air and started to wander in his body. The current source of nature naturally could not be compared to Chi Yu's peak state, but even so, the effect was much better than self-recovery. Wherever the faint green light passed, the cracks between the meridians would suddenly emit a lustrous green light. The light was very faint, but it made the connection between the meridians become tighter. At the same time, it also increased the growth speed of the meridians by several times. Chi Yu calmed down and sensed the continuous input of energy from the Bull Demon King. He couldn't help but feel a little amused. Although he knew that the Bull Demon King spared no effort in helping him to save his own life, Chi Yu couldn't help but feel grateful. If it wasn't for the Bull Demon King, not only would he be finished, but the earth would also be doomed. Overall, although he didn't have good intentions, he still did a good deed. With this trace of source of nature's energy, healing became much easier. First, Chi Yu used the source of nature's energy to transform the energy that the Bull Demon King had injected into him. After going through several qualitative changes, the source of nature's energy could be transformed into other types of energy. Although it was much weaker than absorbing energy from the natural world, it was still around 80 to 90% effective. For Chi Yu, this was already enough. The green energy gradually turned from a gaseous state to a liquid state. Although Chi Yu didn't know how much time had passed outside, he could feel through his mental power that the Bull Demon King wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. If he wanted to return to Earth, he would have to rely on the Bull Demon King's energy. At that moment, he told the Bull Demon King through his mental power that his help was no longer needed. The Bull Demon King heaved a huge sigh of relief. After withdrawing his palms, he panted heavily. He didn't know how long it had been since he felt this close to exhaustion. Not only did his energy have to support the immortal domain, but it also had to be absorbed by Chi Yu at the same time. These two aspects consumed a lot of energy. Fortunately, Old Bull's energy was strong. If it was someone else, they probably wouldn't have been able to hold on for so long. However, Chi Yu quickly reported back to the Bull Demon King. A faint green light seeped out of his body and filled the cave created by the Bull Demon King. The Bull Demon King naturally understood what he meant. He forcefully endured the mental fatigue and immediately began to cultivate. With the help of the source of nature's energy, the various radiation energy on the asteroid could be absorbed. How could the Bull Demon King let go of such an opportunity? He desperately needed this energy to restore his condition. Chi Yu released the source of nature's energy and used it to replace the immortal domain to maintain the connection of his meridians. At the same time, under the effect of the source of nature's energy, he began to absorb the various energy on the asteroid, just like the Bull Demon King. Through the conversion of the source of nature's energy, the radiation energy gradually turned into water molecules. The blue thundercloud force appeared in Chi Yu's body. Chi Yu knew that in order to fully recover, he had to first heal his injuries. Only with a healthy body could he better recover his strength. Therefore, he chose the water thundercloud force. Under the combined effect of the water thundercloud force's Kirin's marrow and muscle cleansing technique and the source of nature's energy, his body could recover in a short period of time. Chi Yu's choice was undoubtedly the correct one. As he gathered more and more energy, the rate at which his injuries healed also increased. A faint light flickered. Every time the energy changed, Chi Yu felt a sense of comfort spread throughout his body. Now, it wouldn't take long for his strength to finally recover. When that time came, it would be time for him and the Bull Demon King to leave the asteroid. As long as the asteroid did not leave the solar system and the Bull Demon King could find Earth's position, Chi Yu was confident that he could return to his motherland. The source of nature's energy not only had great benefits in the process of usual cultivation, but through this space battle, Chi Yu also discovered the mystery of the source of nature's energy in space. As long as he had the source of nature's energy, he could be said to be immortal in space. Through continuous conversion to replenish enough energy, he didn't need any food at all. As the cultivation continued, Chi Yu finally struggled back from the edge of death. This time, it was not the most dangerous for him. At least, His situation was much better than the last time when he was trapped by Yumu. After all, it was only a physical injury now, but the mental injury was even more severe. As his body gradually recovered, his energy continued to increase. Chiyu also became calmer and calmer. After finally solving the crisis on Earth, Chiyu couldn't help but have a lot of ideas. Master Zagrua's prediction was undoubtedly correct. However, he once said that the crisis on Earth would be multifaceted. The problem of the asteroid had been solved. So, what would the next crisis be? If it was a terrifying cosmic destructive force like the asteroid, perhaps Earth would no longer be able to resist it. Even he couldn't. After all, Earth could no longer have tens of thousands of nuclear bombs to stop the asteroid. After thinking calmly, Chiyu immediately judged that the most likely next crisis would come from the Hell world. Although Lingere didn't say how Hell would come to the human world, but from her and Lucifer's confident tone, it was very likely that Hell would come. However, for such a crisis, Chiyu wasn't too worried. Before his strength increased to 8 clouds, he could already compete with Lucifer with the 2 artifacts. Even if Satan's strength was twice that of Lucifer, with the doppelganger domain and overall promotion to 8 clouds, he might still have a chance. Of course, the premise was that he had to recast the Xianyuan sword first. Without the Xianyuan sword, his strength would undoubtedly be greatly reduced. Thinking of this, Chiyu couldn't help but realize how much he relied on the Xianyuan sword. The increase in strength that a super artifact could bring was indeed huge. Without the help of the Xianyuan sword, he probably wouldn't know how many times he would have died. Brother Xianyuan, don't worry. No matter how difficult it is, I will try my best to help you recover. For you, and for myself. If Hell was the second crisis, then what was the next one? From Zagrua's prediction, there should be more than 2 crises, and it was very likely that there would be a third crisis. The problem of Hell wasn't just his own problem. From this operation, the Vatican didn't seem to be so despicable. There were also the Greek guardians of Yumu. With everyone working together, they should be able to deal with it. However, the unknown third crisis was what Chiyu was most worried about now. Something that couldn't be predicted was undoubtedly the possibility of not being prepared. Time passed quickly, and Chiyu didn't know how much time had passed. When the energy in his body was finally replenished, his cultivation finally ended. The Bull Demon King and Chiyu opened their eyes almost at the same time. The withdrawal of the source of nature naturally woke him up from his cultivation. Looking at Chiyu, who had regained his vigor, Old Bull couldn't help but be secretly shocked. This kid's strength had become even stronger. Fortunately, he had already lost the Xianyuan sword. Otherwise, he might one day surpass me in strength. When that time comes, I'm afraid he'll become my biggest obstacle. Unfortunately, the time was not ripe yet. Otherwise, I should have destroyed him now. How many days has it been? Chiyu asked the Bull Demon King calmly. The Bull Demon King said about 3 days. We can still wait a while before taking action, in case we expend too much energy flying in the universe. Let's go out and take a look. As he spoke, Chiyu stood up and walked outside. He, who had recovered his strength, naturally wouldn't be afraid of the radiation outside. The first stage of attribute mutation silently produced a layer of Kirin armor that covered his body. The Bull Demon King was slightly stunned. He followed behind Chiyu and walked out. Now he was like a loyal bodyguard. After walking out of the cave, a scorching airflow rushed towards them. The surrounding temperature was very high, and Chiyu was surprised to find that the temperature here was at least 100 degrees Celsius. He didn't know if this was the temperature of the asteroid itself, or if it was because it had been bombarded by nuclear bombs. As far as the eye could see, huge craters could be seen in the asteroid. Obviously, they were all caused by nuclear bombs. Perhaps it was because of the powerful shock waves from the nuclear bombs, but now, everywhere he could see was actually emitting a layer of metallic luster. The Bull Demon King, who was beside Chiyu, said, "What's there to see here? There's an unpleasant smell everywhere, and there's that radiation you guys are talking about. If it weren't for our strength, ordinary humans probably wouldn't even be able to hold on for a second here." Chiyu nodded. The environment here was really too harsh. Not only was the temperature high, but there was also radiation everywhere. Moreover, the gravity on the asteroid was at least 3 times that of Earth. Ordinary people would probably find it difficult to even walk here, and they would immediately be destroyed by the raging radiation. However, Chiyu naturally had a purpose for coming out. He was very curious about the structure of this asteroid. Before the nuclear bombs were launched, he didn't think too much about it. However, after the nuclear bombs were launched and exploded on the asteroid, Chiyu couldn't help but look at these nuclear bombs in a different light. After many years of research, the power of these nuclear bombs was simply unimaginable. Chiyu secretly calculated. According to the size of Earth, those nuclear bombs were probably enough to blow up 1/5 of Earth. On the other hand, this asteroid was only 1/70 of Earth's volume. If its density was similar to Earth's, then it would be directly destroyed by the nuclear bombs. However, the facts prove that the structure of this asteroid was extraordinary. All the nuclear bombs had only destroyed 1/3 of its surface. It could be seen that only the rocks on the surface have been destroyed. Under the high temperature and the powerful explosive shock waves, the asteroid seemed to have been compressed. Although there were some cracks on its surface, Chiyu had used his mental strength to investigate before he stopped training just now. Those cracks were far less deep than imagined. Now, the whole body of the asteroid was like a huge metal ball, and an extremely solid metal ball. Naturally, Chiyu was very interested in such a metal, so he pulled the Bull Demon King out. Under the gaze of the Bull Demon King, Chiyu slowly squatted on the ground. The fire thundercloud force circulated, causing his right hand to instantly turn red. He carefully pressed his hand on the surface of the asteroid, and instantly, a huge wave of geothermal energy was transmitted. So hot. Fortunately, the temperature of the Kirin True Fire was not comparable to the temperature of this asteroid, especially after Chiyu reached the 8 Cloud Realm. Under the effect of the thundercloud force in his hand, the surface of the asteroid in front of him began to gradually soften. This process was very short, but Chiyu was already very surprised. He knew very well how powerful the thundercloud force he used was. He calculated that the bodies of the mecha soldiers would probably have already been turned into liquid under his thundercloud force. However, the unknown metal in front of him only softened. With a smooth flow, a sharp blade appeared in Chiyu's hand out of thin air. He had not used Kirin Illusion for a long time. The increase in Kirin Thundercloud Force had greatly increased the power of Kirin Illusion, at least in Chiyu's opinion. The current Kirin Illusion's power was definitely not inferior to Lung Air's Devil's Kiss. As the red light flashed, Chiyu cut a piece of metal from the ground. He then stood up and used the Thundercloud Force to cool the piece of metal before carefully observing it. The Bull Demon King also came to Chiyu's side. He was about the same height as Chiyu now, and he looked at the piece of metal strangely. However, he came from the era of the ancient beasts, so he naturally could not understand what Chiyu was trying to do. Chiyu looked at the piece of metal in his hand, and his eyes flickered. He used several types of energy in his body to test it, and then used his spiritual power to wrap the piece of metal and examine it carefully. Only then did he completely confirm his thoughts. He casually threw the piece of metal to Old Bull and said, "What do you think of this?" Old Bull took the piece of metal, and his hand sank. He could not help but be surprised. This thing seemed to be much heavier than it was. It was only the size of a palm, but it weighed close to 100 kilograms. "What do you mean?" Bull Demon King glanced at Chiyu. Chiyu smiled and said, "Let's see if it's sturdy." Bull Demon King nodded, and a layer of gray air surged out from his hands. He suddenly exerted force, and the piece of metal in his hands was immediately pressed into a metal pancake. His hands seemed to be made of iron and copper, and the extremely sturdy piece of metal was rubbed around like plasticine in his hands, continuously changing into various shapes. However, the expression on Bull Demon King's face gradually changed, and he became more and more surprised. Not bad at all. Chiyu, you really did a good thing for me." Chiyu looked at him with interest and said, "Tell me your opinion." Bull Demon King said, "This thing is very sturdy. I don't know how to describe it, but it's very sturdy. Not only is it sturdy, but it's also very flexible. It's not easy to destroy. Unless one's absolute strength far exceeds its endurance, it's very difficult to destroy it. I tried it just now, even if it's me, to completely destroy it without leaving a trace. I'm afraid I'd have to use close to 20% of my strength. Do you think it's sturdy? Moreover, this thing should still be able to be condensed. If it can be condensed, then the quality will become even better. It just so happens that I don't have a suitable weapon. Chiyu, why don't you do me a favor? The power of your fire energy just now is not bad. How about you help me refine a weapon? Chiyu was stunned for a moment and looked at Bull Demon King with some amusement and said, "You want me to help you?" Bull Demon King was also stunned, and only then did he remember that Chiyu was not his subordinate and that their relationship was more of an enemy. His face showed some embarrassment, and he threw the piece of metal in his hands to Chiyu. "Okay, I'll help you." Chiyu's next sentence made Bull Demon King a little dazed, and he asked for a reason. Chiyu smiled and said, "Take it as repayment for saving my life. After all, without you, I'd be dead by now. Since the metal here is so good, let's take some. I think before we leave, we should be able to forge a weapon for you. Come, let's go look for it." If I'm not wrong, on this small planet, the density of metal is different from place to place. How about we find some of the best quality and then forge it for you? Bull Demon King naturally did not have any objections, but the feeling that Chiyu gave him had become even stranger. The two of them floated up and like stars leaping in a certain direction. Chiyu's method of searching was very simple. It was at the center of the explosion of the nuclear bombs. That was obviously the place where the explosion was the most powerful, and also the place that caused the deepest damage to the planet. The high temperature produced by the explosion of the nuclear bombs was obviously the best for condensing metal. It was not impossible for him to condense the metal using the fire thundercloud force, but they could not stay on this small planet for long. In a short period of time, the metal that they could obtain might not even be enough to forge a weapon for Old Bull. That was why Chiyu had chosen the center of the 10,000-plus nuclear bombs. His judgment was correct. With the location of the nuclear bombs as the center, the closer one was to the center, the more condensed the metal was, and the denser it was. The toughness of the metal shocked Chiyu and Bull Demon King. The two of them quickly searched for every place where the nuclear bombs had exploded. With their strength and Kirin's illusion as a tool, they would cut off a metal that had a diameter of about 3 meters every time they arrived at the center of a nuclear bomb explosion. Bull Demon King gathered them together and piled them up. After an entire day, when Chiyu and Bull Demon King had visited all the nuclear bomb explosion centers, the two of them sat together and rested, exhausted. Not only did they deplete their own energy, but they also depleted their physical bodies. No matter how strong their physical bodies were, they would not be able to withstand a day's torment. Moreover, the environment on this planet was so harsh. Chiyu could not help but reveal a smile as he looked at the metal mountain behind him. He turned to look at Bull Demon King and said, "Old Bull, how big a weapon do you want? What do you want? Let's rest for a while first, then we'll help you forge it." Chiyu realized that when he and Bull Demon King worked together, their chemistry was very good. Otherwise, they would not have been able to gather all the densest metal in just one day. Just the energy and time required to cut the metal alone would probably take more than a week for Chiyu to complete. Bull Demon King thought for a while and said, "Do you remember the one that you cut off? I still want a weapon like that. It should be about 100 meters long and about 2 meters in diameter." Chapter 287. The Bull Demon King said proudly, "Who do you think I am? Can't carry it? You're underestimating me too much. With such a weapon, my strength will definitely increase by a level. I've already calculated that with my strength. I can even control a weapon twice its size." Chiyu looked at him deeply, nodded, and said, "All right then." The asteroid was still flying, but it had already been robbed by a man and a bull. By the time Chiyu and the Bull Demon King quietly left, the pitiful planet was already riddled with holes. Chiyu appeared a little tired as he flew through the air, while the Bull Demon King's face was filled with excitement. At this moment, he was holding a 3-meter-long trident in his hand. No matter how one looked at it, He had returned to the first time Chi Yu had seen him. The forging of this trident consumed a lot of Chi Yu's energy. However, the 8-cloud level Kirin's true fire was really powerful. With the help of the Bull Demon King's energy, it forcibly melted the metal and recast it. The final result was very good. In terms of power alone, this 3-pronged heaven-supporting trident could already be compared to a divine weapon. Even a legendary Jingu Bang could not compare to its weight. Unfortunately, this trident could not have a soul, which meant that it could not become a real divine weapon. But for the Bull Demon King, it was enough. He used some unknown method to shrink the trident to a size that his current body could use. Only then did he protect Chi Yu and fly towards the asteroid's atmosphere. Chi Yu was tired. However, his gains were not small either. Putting aside the fact that his strength had been refined after this round of losses and gains, just the metals that he had obtained were enough to make him stronger. Just the metal alone was enough to make him excited. If it was just the original Kirin bead, he would not have been able to take these metals away, because the capacity of the Kirin bead was too limited. However, things are different now. The Kirin bead had fused with the Kong Tong's seal. Not only had its original amplification effect been greatly enhanced, but its capacity had also been magnified countless times. One had to know that there was a 5-elements domain in the Kong Tong seal controlled by the Yin spirit. What could not fit in that place? The Bull Demon King appeared to be very happy. As he flew, he released his energy without holding back. The special domain that they had used to fight against Chi Yu filled the area around them. Their bodies seemed to liquefy. He flew directly toward the atmosphere. With the Bull Demon King's full strength, they didn't expend much energy and rushed out of the asteroid. They returned to outer space. The Bull Demon King shook off the sweat on his head. The resistance and the intense friction from rushing out of the atmosphere had taken quite a toll on him. He was panting heavily. A gentle green light replaced the Bull Demon King's domain and enveloped the two of them. Under the effect of Chi Yu's energy, the energy within their bodies began to rapidly recover. At this moment, they only had one goal, and that was to return to Earth. It was precisely because of this. It temporarily covered up the conflict between them. A faint light flickered as Chi Yu looked at the vast universe. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Compared to the boundlessness of the universe, what was he? What was the Earth compared to that? Everything was so small. Old Bull, which direction is Earth? Chi Yu turned his head and asked the Bull Demon King. At this moment, the Bull Demon King was still gesturing with the golden trident in his hand. He pointed in a direction and said, "It's over there." I calculated for a moment, considering our flying speed. It'll probably take another 10 days or so to fly back. Chi Yu smiled bitterly and said, "It's a pity that little Peng isn't here. If it were here, it would save a lot of effort." Before using the Big Dipper technique, Chi Yu had deliberately removed the contract between him and Little Peng. This was to prevent Little Peng from dying because of him. Ever since Little Peng and the Golden Winged Eagles had followed him, they had been obediently helping him and the Zodiac army. To Chi Yu, Little Peng was far less of a threat than the Bull Demon King. Therefore, it was not a big deal to let him go. The Bull Demon King looked at Chi Yu and said, "Then why don't you let me go too? I won't have to suffer with you." Chi Yu laughed and said, "In your dreams. It's not that I don't want to let you go, but I can't even if I want to. The life and death domain is not something that I can solve." The Bull Demon King said subconsciously, "What if I have a way?" Chi Yu's body trembled and his gaze suddenly froze. He looked at the Bull Demon King and said, "What did you say?" Only then did the Bull Demon King realize his slip of the tongue. He said awkwardly, "I said if. Do you think I don't want to leave you? If I really had a way, would I have waited until now? You would have been ravaged to death by me long ago." Chi Yu's expression gradually calmed down, and he suppressed the shock in his heart. He looked at the Bull Demon King and could not help but secretly shiver. This old bull, did he really think of a way to get rid of me? If that was the case, it would be best for me to think of a way to send him back to the era of the ancient beasts. This fellow's strength could only be described as unfathomable. Even though Zhou Donghuang's strength had increased a lot, it was still not very possible for him to fight against the Bull Demon King, especially after he lost the Xianyuan sword. It was even more impossible. As he thought of this, a faint light flashed in Chiyu's eyes, and he said, "Stop talking nonsense. Let's go. We still have a long way to go." As he said this, he activated the wind thundercloud force in his body and took the lead in flying in the direction that the Bull Demon King had pointed. The Bull Demon King followed behind Chiyu. His eyes flashed as he looked at Chiyu. No one knew what he was thinking. Flying was boring. Fortunately, they had Chiyu's source of nature energy, so the two did not need to worry about their energy. When they saw the blue planet, their energy was still sufficient. "Chiyu," the Bull Demon King called out to Chiyu. These 10 days of flying were undoubtedly very boring for them. The two of them didn't say much to each other. They were fully immersed in the flight. They stopped and turned to look at the Bull Demon King. Chiyu was surprised to find that the Bull Demon King's expression was very solemn. "What is it, old bull?" The Bull Demon King said. "We are about to return to Earth. Let me do it. I will protect you as you rush into the atmosphere." The atmosphere of the Earth-nurturing sphere is not as thick as that planet. Don't waste any more energy. When we get down, I will return to your body. Looking at the Bull Demon King in surprise, Chiyu thought quickly and said, "Old bull, what's wrong with you? That's not like you at all." The Bull Demon King laughed bitterly and said, "Even I don't know what's wrong with me. However, if there is a day in the future, if I can really leave your body, I will definitely spare your life. How about it?" Chiyu was stunned. He said, "Spare my life?" The Bull Demon King raised a finger and said, "Only once." As he said this, the gentle gaze in his eyes gradually disappeared and was replaced by a faint coldness. Chiyu could not possibly guess what he was thinking. "As you wish. However, don't forget that you have promised me a condition that has not been fulfilled." Chiyu reminded. The Bull Demon King smiled indifferently and said, "Don't forget. After I help you 3 times, you must bring me to find Chiyu." "All right, let's begin." As he spoke, a huge energy swept up and once again enveloped him and Chiyu. "Old bull, wait a minute," Chiyu said after a slight hesitation. The Bull Demon King said, "Why? Is there any other problem? Don't you want to go back?" Chiyu said, "Of course not. However, can you tell me where you came from? During the era of the ancient beasts, you were definitely a different species. Even the king of the divine beasts did not know where you came from. Can you tell me? Why did you appear on Earth? Your strength is not something that the ancient beast can compare to. Moreover, you do not have any clansmen." Hearing Chiyu's question, the Bull Demon King's face suddenly darkened. He looked coldly at Chiyu and said, "I do not wish to hear this question again. You will never know how I came to be. I can only tell you that I belong to this world. Do you think I want to become a beast? To become a monster in the eyes of you humans?" Chiyu looked at the Bull Demon King in a daze. He could even feel a trace of sadness from the Bull Demon King. With a flash of light, the Bull Demon King moved. A huge energy enveloped him and Chiyu's body as they shot straight towards the direction of Earth. Chiyu had never felt the true strength of the Bull Demon King, even now. Every time the Bull Demon King used his ability, there seemed to be a difference. The various kinds of powerful magic seemed to be endless. When the air of Earth entered Chiyu's lungs again, he suddenly realized that this air, which was much more turbid than during the era of the ancient beasts, was actually so wonderful. Looking at the gradually approaching ground, Chiyu's eyes could not help but moisten. "Earth, I'm back. I'm finally back alive." Looking at the ocean and land below, Chiyu felt that everything he did was worth it. So what if he narrowly escaped death? Earth was saved. Billions of humans were saved. His family and friends were also saved. What could be more blissful than this? Dragon Field Courtyard. In the villa's hall, Hairu, Ji Ming Ming, Snow Girl, Lu Xiangbing, the Plant Soul, and Christy were all dressed in white. Some were in business attire, while others were in simple dresses. Sitting in the hall, their eyes seemed to have lost all signs of life. The other Zodiac Guardian warriors were also here. Surprisingly, these maverick guys were all dressed in black suits today. The spacecraft took them back to the United States. Although the news of the asteroid was not announced to the public, they were welcomed back by the presidents of various countries. However, none of this made the Eastern powerhouses feel any better. They were back. More than 99% of them had returned. However, only one person had not returned, and that person was the soul of the East. Except for Ryue, the eyes of the other women were red. Ryue did not cry, because she had become the leader of the East after Chiyu died. It had been a week since she returned to the Dragon Field courtyard. Under Ryue's arrangements, the 12 Zodiac Guardian warriors had returned to their respective families to reunite with them. Originally, Ryue wanted the Zodiac Guardian warriors to go home, but no one was willing to leave. Everyone stayed behind. Ryue, will we hold a funeral for Chiyu? Sudong looked at Ryue and said with some difficulty. Ming Ming's body shot out like an arrow and suddenly appeared in front of Sudong. Her red eyes stared at Sudong fiercely. Funeral? What funeral? Who did you say you want to hold a funeral for? Her voice had become unprecedentedly sharp. Ming Ming, calm down. Things can't be changed. Accept reality. I know you were sad. If you want to cry, just cry. Sudong sighed and looked at Ming Ming in front of him. Tears were the first to flow from his eyes. Everyone present knew that if Chiyu had not been afraid that the final energy explosion would implicate them, Chiyu would have had the highest chance of survival. As long as he had led the entire Zodiac army to launch the final Big Dipper, even if the Xianyuan sword had been broken, he might not have died. However, he did not choose to do so. He left the hope of survival to everyone. He could only face the final sword by himself. That scene would forever be imprinted in everyone's mind. In everyone's hearts, Chiyu is no longer a person, but a god. The god of East, the true guardian. A faint light flashed. Ryue walked to Ming Ming's side and held her in her arms. At this moment, Ming Ming burst into tears and said sadly, Sister Ryue, Chiyu will not die. He did not die so many times in the past, and he will not die this time. We have to wait. Wait for a miracle, okay? I beg you, Sister Ryue, don't hold a funeral. We have to wait. We have to wait for him to come back. Holding Ming Ming in her arms, Ryue also hoped for a miracle. However, reason told them that in the distant space, how could a miracle happen? In order to bring about a miracle, the scene at that time was still flashing in Ryue's mind. After the spacecraft picked up everyone, it was stopped from returning as everyone hoped for a miracle to happen. They hoped to see that Chiyu is not dead. This wait lasted for several days. The American officer on the spaceship had raised an objection, but the entire spaceship had been filled with murderous intent at the time. No one dared to provoke those Eastern lions. Moreover, even the Pope and Yamu were willing to wait. This wait lasted for several days. The spacecraft searched almost every corner of that airspace, but they still did not find anything. This continued until the spacecraft's energy was almost unable to return to Earth. Only then did they return. The President of the United States promised to send all space reconnaissance spacecraft to search for Chiyu's whereabouts. Whether he was dead or alive, they would continue to search. They were back on Earth. The feeling was wonderful, but no one was in the mood to appreciate it. Their souls were gone. As time passed, the miracle they were hoping for became more and more remote. Even the strong Ryue was on the verge of collapse. Miss the phone. It's from Miss Snowgirl. Uncle Zhou walked over with a hands-free phone. Ryue suppressed the sadness in her eyes and gave Snowgirl a look. Snowgirl took a deep breath and took the phone. I'm Snowgirl. Who is looking for me? Although her voice did not tremble because of sadness, it had already returned to its original coldness. Snowgirl? I'm Chi Tianlei. Snowgirl's expression changed slightly, and her voice became much softer. Uncle. Hello. Chi Tianlei said. Has Chiyu returned? We haven't seen him for a long time. Do you know when he will return? After hearing Chi Tianlei's words, Snowgirl's expression changed, and she was speechless for a while. Uncle, I don't know when he will return. I don't know when he will come back. She gritted her teeth to stop the tears from falling from her eyes. She said something against her will. Chi Tianlei sighed and said, Little Dai misses him very much. If you can contact him, ask him to call back. This child, he cannot go home for all kinds of tasks. The main body of the villa next to you is almost completed. I want you to come and see what kind of exterior style and environment design you like. Snow Girl's cherry lips were slightly trembling. Okay, Uncle, wait a minute. When Chiyu comes back, I will definitely ask him to go back to see you. Chi Tianlei smiled and said, not ask him to come see us. You guys come together. Well, all of you come. The method, I told him last time, is almost completed. As long as your family is okay, maybe I can find a way to let you marry him. Snow Girl was stunned for a moment and could no longer bear the sadness in her heart. She stuffed the phone in her hand to Ryua, turned, and ran upstairs. Hey, Snow, why aren't you talking? Uncle, it's Ryua. Snow Girl was a little uncomfortable and went to the washroom. Don't worry, when Chiyu comes back, we will go to see you and Aunt together. After hanging up the phone, the atmosphere in the hall became more solemn. Shang Bing murmured, what to do? What should we do now? Chiyu and his parents just met not long ago. If they know that Chiyu has, how can they accept it? Guan Ping smiled bitterly. There's nothing we can do. We can only tell the truth. We can't always say that Chiyu went to carry out a task. Ryue, it's better to make a decision on this matter as soon as possible. Ryue's eyes were shining with tears. She said firmly, there's no funeral. Unless I see Chiyu's body, he is not dead. No one is allowed to reveal anything about Chiyu. We can only hide it from his parents. One day at a time is one day at a time. Everyone go home and rest. You're all very tired. I will take care of this. Ryue. Su Dong wanted to say something, but when he saw Ryue's hand holding the phone, he swallowed his words. Ryue's hand was trembling. The Tyrannosaurus Rex's hand was shaking slightly. Drops of blood slid down her palm. It was caused by her nails, but she didn't seem to feel it. At this time, the phone rang again. Ryue was stunned. Looking at the phone in her hand, she actually didn't want to answer it. One reason was that she was afraid that it was still Chi-Yu's parents calling. Another reason was that she was afraid that the news of Chi-Yu's body would come from the U.S. After a while, Ryue was Ryue. She forced herself to calm down and pressed the answer button. This is Hi Ryue. Who is this? Her voice was very calm. It was so calm that even the Zodiac guardian warriors around her felt a little scared. Why did you take so long to answer the phone? Ryue, are you okay? Why does your voice sound a little strange? I'm fine. I'm fine. Chi-Yu, Chi-Yu. Ryue screamed. Her hand trembled, and the phone almost fell to the ground. She quickly held the phone tightly with both hands. Is that you? Is it really you? Almost in an instant, everyone surrounded her. Everyone had different expressions on their faces. Some were surprised, and some were shocked. The one who had the biggest reaction was Ming Ming. These days of worry had exhausted her physically and mentally. When she suddenly heard the two words Chi-Yu from Ryue's mouth, she suddenly felt her vision go black and temporarily lost consciousness. Ryue, it's me. I'm not dead. Chi-Yu's excited voice sounded on the other side. Chi-Yu, where are you? Where are you now? Ryue's voice and hands were trembling violently. I'm on Earth. I'm already back. As for what happened, I'll tell you when I get back. Don't worry, I'm fine. I'm really fine. I didn't die that day. I landed on the asteroid and flew back after my energy recovered. You guys wait for me at home. I'll rush back as soon as possible. I still have some things to deal with. I don't think it will take more than 10 days. You guys wait for me at home. Oh, right. I don't have any identification or money with me. I stole this phone from someone else. I don't want to say more. The police are coming to arrest me. Wait for me to go back. The phone hung up. Everyone in the hall had very good hearing. They looked at each other and felt as if a lifetime had passed. He's not dead. He's really not dead. Ryue raised her head and looked at the people around her. The light in her eyes suddenly became scorching. Life was reignited in the Dragon Field courtyard. He's really not dead. Ming Ming slowly woke up. Looking at Ryue, her eyes were full of hope. When she got a positive answer, she couldn't help but burst into tears again. I knew it. I knew he wouldn't die. How could he bear to leave us? That's great. That's really great. The previous depression turned into a sea of tears. The 6 women couldn't help but hug each other and cry. Even Ryue couldn't suppress her inner feelings and cried bitterly with the other women. The Zodiac guardian god warrior's heavy expressions gradually relaxed. Smiles appeared again. Everyone seemed to be rejuvenated. The soul of the East was still there. Their king was about to return. However, if only they could see Chi-Yu's appearance. Perhaps no one would be able to cry. Poor Chi-Yu. Now he was as embarrassed as he could be. After the Bull Demon King brought him through the atmosphere, he returned to his body. When Chi-Yu landed on land, he found himself in the romantic city of Paris. However, he soon found a troublesome problem. He had no clothes to wear. The clothes that previously existed in Kirin's Pearl, because of the repeated losses, had been worn out. Moreover, he was still penniless. Although he could fly with energy, this appearance was too embarrassing. After more than 10 days of flying, although he still had energy, the consumption of his body was still huge. After all, he was still a human. When his feet touched the ground, the first thing he thought of was to find something to eat. However, he didn't only have no clothes. At the same time, he didn't even have money. For a moment, he fell into an awkward situation. Kirin's invisibility played a key role at this time. The invisibility effect prevented him from being seen for the time being. After stealing a mobile phone to make a call, he studied how to make an international call for a long time. While he was making a call, he saw the owner of the phone running over with the police. Although he was invisible, the act of stealing was too embarrassing for him. He carefully threw the phone on the road and quietly ran away. Standing on the street, looking at the fashionable men and women walking on the streets of Paris, Chi-Yu couldn't help but smile bitterly. No matter what, he was also one of the guardians of the East, and he just took away the asteroid for the Earth. Now he was reduced to this. If his friends saw him running naked on the streets of Paris, he didn't know how they would laugh. What should I do now? There was no other way. His stomach was too hungry. Especially when he passed by a bakery, his stomach had reached its limit. In desperation, Chi-Yu had to use his emptying magic hands again. He directly stole a few pieces of bread and stuffed them into his stomach. Then, he stole a set of clothes from a shop. Only then did he feel much better. Activating the invisibility effect, Chi-Yu stood on the streets of Paris and tidied up the tags on his clothes. His body's fatigue still hadn't disappeared. Although he had narrowly escaped death this time, the impact on his body was still very big. The natural source of energy had recovered, but it was energy that had been transformed by radiation. It was not pure, and now he needed a period of adjustment to recover his body. Moreover, these days of flying had made him lose a lot of weight. His hair was messy, and his face was unshaven. No matter how you looked at it, he looked extremely down. He sat down at a corner of the street where there were fewer people. He absorbed the energy molecules in the air and rested. Actually, with his current energy situation, flying back to Yanhuang was not a problem. However, he still had something to deal with, so he didn't return directly. And this was what he had promised Lung Air. Since he had already promised, he had to do it. Thinking of Lung Air's alluring body, he couldn't help but look forward to it. It was just a day of being husband and wife. After completing this matter, he would return to China. In case Lung Air came to find him when he returned, he really wouldn't be able to explain to his confidants. At the same time, he didn't just want to fulfill his promise to Lung Air. The problem of the small planet had been solved. The next disaster on Earth was likely to be brought by hell. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he also wanted to probe Lung Air and see if he could get some useful information. With a ding, a coin landed in front of Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu was stunned. When he looked up, he was surprised to find a young girl standing in front of him. She nodded at him kindly and turned to leave. It can't be. Does she think I'm a beggar? This was not the most embarrassing thing for Chi-Yu. What made it even more difficult for him to accept was that he actually knew this girl. It was none other than the beautiful girl in white, Shui-Yu, whom he had met on the train after his first trip to Tibet. Although he didn't have much contact with Shui-Yu, only a few times, Chi-Yu had a deep impression of her. This girl had a very kind heart and could be said to be a real angel in white. Why was she in Paris? The hunger in his stomach made Chi-Yu immediately react. Shui-Yu, is that you? Shui-Yu suddenly heard someone call her name in the Yanhuang language. She couldn't help but stop in her tracks in surprise. When she turned around, she saw the beggar whom she had given alms stand up from the ground. You know me? Shui-Yu asked doubtfully. At this moment, from her angle, Chi-Yu's tall figure was wearing clothes that didn't fit him. Although they looked new, They were really very strange. His hair was messy, and his beard almost covered half his face. Furthermore, it seemed to be stuck together. No matter how she looked at him, she didn't seem to know him. Qiyu could tell from Shueiyu's doubtful gaze that she didn't recognize him. He couldn't help but laugh bitterly in his heart. But in order to not use stealing to satisfy his desire for good food, he could only brace himself and take a few steps forward. He said, "Shueiyu, I'm Qiyu. Do you still remember me?" Shueiyu stilled and looked Qiyu up and down. The gaze in her eyes gradually turned from confusion to clarity. Qiyu combed his messy hair and held his hand like a knife. Under Shueiyu's shocked gaze, he used the thundercloud force to cut off the beard on his face and revealed his true appearance. Heavens! Qiyu, it really is you. How did you become like this? Why have you come to Paris? Looking at Shueiyu, Qiyu couldn't help but feel helpless. He smiled bitterly and said, "It's a long story. How do I say it? Right now, I could be considered to be in trouble. Shueiyu, can you help me a bit?" Shueiyu hurriedly nodded and said, "Of course. How do you want me to help you? Return to the country?" Qiyu shook his head. He really wanted to find a hole in the ground and crawl into it. He was already starting to regret calling Shueiyu. I'm hungry. Can you? Chapter 288. Looking at this kind and understanding girl in front of him, Qiyu was really grateful to the point of tears. Things would be easier if there was food. He hurriedly nodded to Shueiyu and walked to the other side of the street under Shueiyu's lead. His disheveled hair wasn't too big of a problem, but Qiyu's attire was a huge problem. No matter how he looked like he had just escaped from a mental hospital. The suit he stole was quite high-end, but it seemed to be suitable for people about 7 meters tall. Now, it seemed that whether it was the sleeves or the trouser legs, they all revealed a lot of skin. Moreover, he didn't have underwear inside. The chest area of the suit directly revealed his bronze-colored chest muscles. Shueiyu's attire was very conservative in the eyes of Parisians. A white top and a light blue long skirt. Her long hair was neatly combed into a ponytail behind her head. She exuded an air of spirituality and elegance, a typical Oriental beauty. Standing together with Qiyu was really a bit out of place. Shueiyu didn't ask much and directly brought Qiyu to a restaurant. From entering the restaurant until he was full, Qiyu didn't know what he had eaten. Whatever Shueiyu ordered, he stuffed it into his stomach as fast as he could. As for how much he had eaten, he didn't know. He only knew that the number of times Shueiyu ordered food seemed to be a lot, and the gaze as she looked at him became more and more surprised. Wiping the traces on his mouth, Qiyu raised his head with some embarrassment and said, "Thank you, Shueiyu. Fortunately, I met you today." Shueiyu looked at Qiyu with a smile and said, "Fortunately, you are full. Otherwise, I really wouldn't have any money to pay the bill." Money? Qiyu's heart moved, and he immediately thought of a solution. "Shueiyu, can you lend me your phone for a while? Then tell me your card number." Shueiyu was taken aback and handed the phone to Qiyu. "What do you want my card number for?" Qiyu said, "To return the money to you. Actually, I lost my documents. If you have a card, I can get someone to transfer money from China. In this case, my problem is solved. I can't always trouble you." Only then did Shueiyu understand. Qiyu said he had already dialed the number. Originally, he wanted to call Ruyue, but then he thought about it. "I haven't been in contact with my parents for a long time. Anyway, my parents have money, so I'll let them transfer the money to me." "Dad, is that you?" Qiyu dialed Qi Tianlei's private number. "Qiyu, you still know how to call me. Why didn't you come back to have a look?" Qi Tianlei said discontentedly. Qiyu smiled apologetically. "It's my fault, Dad. How are you, your mother, and your sister? Did you do as I said?" When Qi Tianlei heard Qiyu ask about their cultivation progress, he immediately became excited. "It's very effective. These days, I've been practicing according to the cultivation method you left behind. My body's condition is much better than before, and I'm full of energy every day. Your mother is the same. We both seem so much younger. It seems that there are really a lot of magical things in our world." Hearing Qi Tianlei's words, Qiyu immediately felt relieved. "It's good that it's effective. Dad, I'm in France now. I'm afraid it'll be some time before I can go back." Qi Tianlei said, It doesn't matter where you are. But even if you don't come back, you have to call me often. What you're doing now really makes your mother and I feel uneasy. Call back often to let us know that you're safe. Also, you have to care more about your girlfriends at home. You don't have to worry about their problems. I'm already thinking of a solution for you. I'll tell you in detail when you come back later. Chi said, huh? That works? Chi Tianlei smiled and said, why not? After all, you're my only son. Dad, can you transfer some money to me? I lost my documents, and now I'm living on the streets. Chi Yu pretended to be pitiful. Chi Tianlei stared blankly for a moment. Then he jokingly scolded, you brat, don't give me that. Do you think I don't know your ability? You want money, right? How much? Tell me. I can transfer it any time within 300 million US dollars. Chi Yu was startled and hurriedly said, no, I don't need that much money. You could just give me $1 million. Let me solve the urgent problem first. I can't even afford to eat now, so I can't steal or rob. Won't that make you lose face? Chi Tianlei was surprised and asked, you really don't have money? Did something happen? He was very confident in Chi Yu's ability. Although Kirin Group was far from being comparable to the Golden Grains Group, its assets were still considerable, especially since the launch of the 3 major series of products. Although they were expensive, the demand couldn't meet the supply. Chi Yu forced a smile and said, nothing happened. It's just an accident. I lost my money and documents. I found a friend now. Can you transfer some money to me first? I'll return it to you after I return to China. Chi Tianlei unhappily said, your father and son, why are you still talking about this? Tell me the account number. Chi Yu nodded to Shui Yu and asked for the account number. After giving it to Chi Tianlei, he hung up the phone. Shui Yu looked at Chi Yu with a somewhat strange gaze. Chi Yu, I remember you once said that you're an orphan, right? Chi Yu smiled and said, I used to be, but not anymore. I found my long-lost parents. You're really unfathomable. From the first time I saw you to the second time, you gave me a different feeling each time. Can you tell me why? Shui Yu looked at Chi Yu with a strange gaze. Chi Yu gently shook his head and said, there are some things you'd better not know. By the way, why did you come to Paris? Did you come here to work? Shui Yu said, no, my father came here for a meeting, so he brought me along. We'll be returning to China in a few days. What about you? Why did you come here, and why did you end up like this? Actually, you can find the police. They should be able to help you too. Chi Yu smiled bitterly and said, I don't have any identification right now. More importantly, I don't know French at all. Fortunately, I met you. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would really have to starve. No matter what, thank you for this time. If there's anything you need help with in the future, come find me at the Dragonfield Courtyard. No matter what it is, I'll definitely help you solve it. Shui Yu looked at Chi Yu and couldn't help but be somewhat surprised. He looked so down and out, but his tone was shockingly big. No matter what it was, what did that mean? When paying the bill, Shui Yu was shocked. It wasn't because the meal was too expensive, but after paying the bill, she specially went to check the balance. She was shocked to find that there was an additional 10 million US dollars in her account. Chi Yu, so much money. How do I withdraw it for you? There seems to be a limit to withdrawing money abroad. Chi Yu smiled and said, no problem, just give me a little less. We'll talk about the rest later. Shui Yu frowned and said, how can I do that? You're so mysterious. It won't be easy to find you in the future. Chi Yu thought about it and said, that's easy. If we can't withdraw money, we can at least spend it. We'll just go spend it. He pulled along the dumbfounded Shui Yu. The two returned to the streets. Chi Yu's method of buying things was very simple. After all, it was the money from his father. He couldn't take the rest, and Shui Yu didn't want it either, so he could only spend it. So, after he let Shui Yu withdraw 20,000 US dollars in cash, he followed Shui Yu to the most expensive street in Paris to go shopping. First of all, he dressed himself up and found a place to do his hair. As for his body, it wasn't a big problem. His earth and water thundercloud forces' self-cleaning ability was still very strong. So, although he looked disheveled, his body was still very clean. 2 hours later, Chi Yu had already changed completely, returning to his original clothes. Black shirt, black pants, black leather shoes. After his hair was combed, it was only slightly longer than before, but it didn't affect his image. Sitting in a coffee shop, Shuei stared blankly at Chiyu in front of her. For a moment, she couldn't help but have mixed feelings. At this moment, the person in front of her seemed to have become a different person. It was like Cinderella had changed into a princess costume. She didn't even dare to recognize him. The expensive black shirt was inlaid with precious silver crystal buttons. He looked noble and elegant. He was tall and had broad shoulders. It was as if he was born to be a clothes rack. A head of long silver hair fell behind him, forming a sharp contrast with the black clothes he wore. His appearance wasn't much different from the first time she saw him, but his temperament had already undergone an earth-shattering change. His clear eyes flickered with a deep light. Although he had a smile on his face, he gave people a faint sense of oppression. It was as if only someone in a superior position could have this kind of feeling. Even when facing her own father, Shuei didn't feel this kind of pressure. Chiyu said somewhat helplessly, "It seems that I'm really not a person who is good at spending money. We didn't spend much just now." When he said he didn't spend much, in fact, more than $100,000 had already disappeared. Of course, compared to the number of $10 million, it really wasn't much. "Shuei, why didn't you let me buy something for you? If it wasn't for you, I'm afraid I'd still be wandering the streets." As he said that, he couldn't help but reveal a slightly comical look. This caused the invisible pressure on Shuei to weaken a bit. Shuei smiled and said, "That's your money. How can I take it? They were just ordinary friends." How could she casually accept things from others? She really couldn't understand this mysterious man in front of her. "Chiyu, what are you doing now? Are you still working as an artist? No wonder you came to France." About that, I guess so. "Shuei, I'll be leaving first. Since I got the money, I'll immediately make a trip to Germany." Shuei was stunned for a moment and said, "But didn't you lose your passport and identification? How are you going to Germany?" Chiyu smiled mysteriously and said, "I have my ways. If you have any difficulties in the future, remember to look for me." Shuei suddenly said, "Chiyu, are you very rich? Or should I say, is your family very rich? Why? Do you need money? How much? If it's within my capabilities, I'll definitely help you." When it came to money, Chiyu didn't have much of a concept. Shuei shook her head and said, "It's not that I need help. Recently, my father and I have been participating in all kinds of medical activities in various countries. It touched me deeply. As a doctor, I've always followed the principle of saving people, hoping to help more people. But now, I've discovered that a person's power is ultimately limited. No matter how brilliant my medical skills are, I can't help many people with my power alone. Do you know that many places in our country are still very poor, and some places don't even have water to drink? Can you imagine that a person can only take 3 baths in a lifetime? The first time is when he's born, the second time is the night before his marriage, and the third time is when he dies. Perhaps you don't believe it, but this is the real situation in our country. In those places that are barren and lack water, some people can only drink a few spoonfuls of water a day. Shuei's emotions clearly became agitated when she said that. In some places overseas, there are also all kinds of problems, but the charity system overseas is much better than ours. Many of the rich in our country only think about how to make money all day long. But some of the rich overseas are not like that. They will establish a fund to help those who need help as much as possible. Seeing this, I have many thoughts. If it's possible, if your family has a lot of money, why don't you use it on charity? Hearing Shuei's words, Chiyu couldn't help but be shocked. But don't our country also have a lot of charity organizations? The country spends a lot of money on poverty alleviation every year. Shuei sighed and said, "However, the power of a country is also limited. You know, as the most populous country in the world, can you imagine how much food our country consumes every day? Although the country is constantly working hard, if each of us can help, won't the poor be able to get out of poverty earlier?" Chiyu nodded his head and sternly said, "I understand." "Shuei, can you do me a favor?" Shuei was taken aback and said, "Help you? Go ahead." Chiyu smiled and said, "You mentioned the charity foundation just now. I'm not cultured, so I don't know much about these things. Most of my friends are also very busy. Since you really want to help others, and I have absolute trust in your character. I will help you. So, can I ask you to chair a fund? I'll provide the money, and you'll provide the effort. Together, we'll achieve your dream, which is also my dream. How about it? Shuei never thought that Chiyu would agree to her suggestions so readily, and even more so that he would directly decide to let her help him manage the charity foundation. For a moment, she couldn't help but be stunned, and the way she looked at Chiyu became more and more strange. Chiyu smiled and said, "What? Haven't you seen a handsome guy before? If you don't say anything, it means that you agree. Then it's decided. After you return to the country, go to the Dragon Field courtyard first. You've met Ryue before, so tell her what I said. She will definitely fully support you. As for the funds, the remaining $9 million here will be the startup funds. Don't be afraid of spending money. Do whatever you want to do. I will support you unconditionally. In the future, I will do my best to inject some funds into it to help you continue to complete your charity." Shuei suddenly felt that her heart was beating very fast. The man in front of her seemed to be much more pleasing to the eye than before. "Chiyu, you didn't even ask me what I wanted to do before you agreed?" She asked tentatively. Chiyu smiled and said, "I said, I believe in your character. As the saying goes, if you doubt someone, don't use him. If you use him, don't doubt him. Just go ahead and do it." Actually, I've always had this kind of thought, but I've been too busy and didn't have the time to think too much about it. This time, it just so happened that you brought up this suggestion. I feel that it's the right time, and you're the right person. Are you worried about the funds? It's fine. I think, at least in the next few years, I should be able to continuously invest some money. As for how much exactly, it will depend on our company's profitability. Shuei stared blankly at Chiyu and said, "But you really agreed just like that?" Chiyu sighed and said, "Don't doubt my sincerity. I've told you before that I'm an orphan. Perhaps you'll find it strange to suddenly hear that I have parents today, but a person's fate is often very difficult to understand. When I was young, I was separated from my parents, or rather, I was separated by some bad people. Afterwards, I've always lived in an orphanage. If it wasn't for the country's charity organization, I'm afraid I would have long frozen to death on the streets. I've always held a kind of grateful heart towards our country. If I don't have the ability, then forget it. I still have a bit of ability now. Why don't I go and do something? What you said is very right. If each of us can contribute a bit, then our country can become stronger even faster. Isn't that right?" Shuei nodded and looked at Chiyu, her eyes revealing a trace of relief. "Thank you, Chiyu. You're really a good person." Chiyu laughed and said, "Don't praise me like that. I won't be used to it." "Then it's settled. I don't care what you do. In the future, I'm only responsible for paying. You have to put in effort. It's just that charity isn't something that can be done in a day or two. In the future, I'm afraid it will take up a lot of your energy. We'll have this fund. Let's call it the Kirin Fund, the same name as my company. You'll be in charge. You'll be in charge of all the employees' salaries and all the expenses. I won't interfere and bring you any trouble." Shuei shook her head and said, "No, I can't." This time, it was Chiyu's turn to be surprised. "Don't you want to contribute to charity?" "Why not? Don't worry. You can handle the issue of pay yourself. I have no objections." "No, it's not pay. I don't have high requirements for life, as long as I can maintain the most basic of living. I can even not ask for a salary. However, I'm still too young after all, and I feel that my abilities are far from enough. If you really want to do this fund, then let me recommend someone." Chiyu is very smart and immediately understood Shuei-yu's meaning. "You mean your father, right?" Shuei-yu's pretty face turned red, and she nodded, saying, "Yes. Father is an authoritative expert in the medical world and has good relationships in all aspects. It should be the best choice for him to take charge of our fund." When she said the two words her pretty face couldn't help but turn even redder. "Okay, no problem. Then you go ahead and do it. I'll be more at ease if I leave it to Uncle. Shuei, I have to leave now. I'll be back in about 10 days. If there's anything in the future, you can come find me at Lanyu Courtyard, where you can find Ryue. She has always been in charge of the family's matters." Shuei asked tentatively, "Is Chief Hai your girlfriend?" Chiyu smiled and nodded, saying, "Yes. She's my housekeeper." For some reason, Shui felt a bit of disappointment in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face, and said with a faint smile, "Then I'll have to give you my blessings. Remember to inform me when the wedding is held." Yu kept sending Shui back to her place of residence before separating from her. Meeting Shui was a pleasant surprise for him, and Shui-Yu's words touched him deeply. He suddenly found the motivation to earn money. How much money could he spend? No matter how much money he had, it was just a number. After maintaining his basic living expenses, wasn't it a good choice to use the money he earned on charity? Yes, that's it. In the future, earning more money from foreigners and using it on people who needed it was the best. Thinking to this point, Yu couldn't help but be in a good mood. He found a place where there was no one and released Kieran's stealth. He floated up under the stealth state, determined the direction, and flew towards Germany. The atmosphere in the Dark Parliament was very heavy. There was only one reason, and that was because of that cold and elegant princess of hell. Saw? Boom! The Dark Parliament and the Dark Warrior Emperor looked at each other and muttered, "This is already the 7th time today. If this goes on, do you think Her Royal Highness will demolish this place?" The Dark Warrior Emperor said helplessly, "There's nothing we can do about it. The princess has been in a bad mood recently. What can we do as subordinates? We can only let her be. Even Lord Lucifer didn't interfere. What can we do?" The Dark Parliament sighed and said, "It seems that Her Highness has fallen in love with that human. But it's no wonder. Beauties love heroes, after all. That guy is too strong. He actually used his physical strength to fight against an asteroid. From him, I finally understand how powerful a human can be." The Dark Warrior Emperor lowered his voice and said, "Actually, that person's death is definitely a good thing for our infernal realm. With that kind of strength, if we come to the human world in the future, he will definitely become a huge obstacle. Now that he's dead, how can the Pope and the others pose any threat to us?" The Dark Parliament's eyes emitted a sinister light. "This world will soon belong to us. At that time, His Majesty Satan will be the ruler of this world. Darkness will cover the human world. The purple sun will dye the earth. What a beautiful scene it will be." Lungair sat on a large black chair, gasping for breath. The conference table in front of her has been turned into powder, pink energy light fluctuating around her body. Lucifer stood at the side. His face was very calm, as if everything in front of him was normal. Compared to Lungair's anger, his current mood was very good. The problem of the asteroid hitting the Earth was solved, the human who had humiliated him was dead, and the guy who could pose a threat to the infernal realm had completely disappeared. What could be better than this? If it wasn't for Lungair's current mood, he really wanted to laugh a few times to release the joy in his heart. "Uncle Lucifer," Lungair suddenly said. "Ah." Lucifer woke up from his fantasies. "Mississippi, you say, is he really dead?" Lungair's eyes were shining with tears. Her hands were clenched so tightly that there was no trace of blood. Lucifer sighed and said, "Miss, you should get over it. In that case, it was impossible for the human to survive. You also saw how much energy he absorbed at that time. I'm afraid even His Majesty would not be able to bear it. Moreover, he relied on that forcefully absorbed energy to contend against the asteroid. Even the divine artifact in his hand was destroyed, not to mention him. No matter how strong a human is, he is still a human. Mississippi, my condolences." "Bastard. Yu, you bastard." Lungair cursed. "You. How can you die just like that? You didn't keep your word. You promised me. Why? Why did you die just like that?" Tears flowed down her beautiful face. Her delicate body trembled unceasingly. Looking up at the ceiling, Lungair's sorrow had already reached the extreme. Lucifer was smart enough not to say anything. At this time, even he did not dare to add fuel to the fire. There's no need to be so vicious. Even if I'm a bastard, I won't go back on my word. Lucifer's body emitted a black light. His sharp eyes looked in a direction and said in a deep voice, "Who is it?" A black figure wrapped in a dark red cloak slowly appeared in front of them. A lazy smile hung on Chiyu's face, his gaze gentle as he looked at Lungair. Seeing his sudden appearance, Lungair could not help but be completely stunned. She cutely rubbed her eyes with her small hands, confirming that she did not see wrongly. Before Chi Yu could speak again, Ling'er had already screamed and pounced forward. Like an octopus, she wrapped around Chi Yu's body. Her pair of slender, round, and powerful thighs tightly wrapped around Chi Yu's waist, her arms wrapped around his neck. Crying out in pain, Chi Yu bared his teeth and looked at Ling'er. There's no need to be so intimate. Ling'er fiercely bit the thick flesh on his shoulder. Through his black shirt, faint traces of blood could be seen, showing how much strength she had used. Lucifer looked at Chi Yu unwillingly and muttered to himself, "He's not dead even after that. This guy is really a monster." Chi Yu glanced at Lucifer and said, "I'm here to fulfill my promise. Those who have nothing to do with this, can you leave now?" When Lucifer's eyes met with Chi Yu's, his body trembled violently, while Chi Yu hugged Ling'er and took half a step back. A trace of shock appeared in Lucifer's eyes. He could clearly feel the strength of Chi Yu's own strength. Previously, when he fought with Chi Yu, he could only defeat him by relying on that special divine weapon. But now, it seemed that Chi Yu's strength was also above his. How is this possible? How could a human's strength improve so quickly? Without waiting for Lucifer to think too much, Ling'er tilted her head and said to Lucifer, "Uncle Lucifer, please wait outside for a while. I have something to say to this guy." Lucifer sighed in his heart. He knew that the only person who could stop Ling'er now was His Majesty Satan. Dragging his somewhat heavy footsteps, he walked out. Ling'er turned around and met Chi Yu's eyes. She stared fiercely into his eyes and said, "You can still feel pain. Does that prove that you're a living person?" Chi Yu said helplessly, "As you wish. Ling'er, I'm here to fulfill my promise. If you don't think it's necessary, I'll return home." In your dreams. Shyness was a rare emotion for people in hell. Ling'er stared deeply at Chi Yu. Without waiting for him to speak again, she suddenly used force with her hands and tore Chi Yu's shirt into pieces.